Quentin, can you, oh, there we go.
Yay!
Hey. Counselor Finn, are you there?
Yes.
Great, thank you. Minute, it doesn't look like your microphone's hooked up unless you want to try.
I ignored it.
Jen, your microphone's on, so can you just do a sound check for me?
Hi, Judy. How are you?
Hi, good. I can hear you. I don't. 1 minute to 5. Just wanted to let you know that it looks like all staff is logged in. We are waiting for 3 councillors. Councillor Oche did decline, so I'm not sure that he'll be calling in, but Councillor Harrigan and Councillor Sakachi we're still waiting on. And just to let everybody know, this evening we are going to be trying the PowerPoint, but we are also going to try the video with the presenter only. So with that, Mr. Mayor, I'll hand it over to yourself. And just so you know, there has been no pecuniary interest and no supplementary agendas for this evening. Thank you.
Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's 5 o'clock. I've been told there is no pecuniary interest, so I just want to reconfirm that no one has any pecuniary interest, direct or indirect, for closed session or for the session items in general nature thereof. Hearing none, we have one agenda item tonight, and I'll pass it over to the clerk.
I've already done my housekeeping stuff from the clerk perspective, so I'll hand it back.
Yeah.
All right,
hi.
we'll go over to Karen Loney then.
Great. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. And welcome everyone to Council's first ever virtual strategy session. We're looking forward to tonight, and we're hoping it's all going to work. Tonight is about creating a forum for Council and the executive management team to have a planning session that looks at Chatham-Kent's current state and planning for the future. We welcome those who have joined to watch online. In preparation for tonight's discussion, a background package was provided for those watching. You can find these documents at www.chatham-kent.ca/council and click on tonight's agenda. As this is a strategy session, the format will be a bit more informal, and at times we will call on Council, actually probably in alphabetical order, to respond. Additionally, for Council, there is a chat box that we encourage you to send your comments into, and just do know that these will be made public, and we are hoping that then they can be part of the summary of the session, because unfortunately we're not sure we're going to have time to respond to every single one. So unfortunately, to keep us on time, I do have the not so fun task of setting time limits on both administration and council. And so I'll ask for apology in advance. But if anybody else would like to do it, you're more than welcome. But since probably hearing none, I'm actually going to pass it back to the mayor to just provide some opening comments.
Thanks, Karen. I just wanted to speak very briefly. Tonight's meeting is a very important one. What we're going to be talking about tonight and the decisions we're going to make over the next few months based on this discussion is going to direct our community for the next 20 years. And so certainly this is something that's exciting, the amount of growth we're experiencing in our community now. And this is a discussion of how do we keep that going and what do we plan on seeing in our community for the next 20 years, what investments we have to make. So I'm looking forward to some great discussion tonight, and I encourage questions of administration, and looking forward to a great meeting. I'll pass it over to Don. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. Good evening, everyone. So the slide you see up on the screen now is really a summary of why we're here this evening. We have 3 major topics that we want to cover. We're providing council and the community with an update on what the municipality administration in particular has done with the recommendations from the Chatham-Kent Economic Recovery Task Force. And all of those detailed explanations have been shared with the package that council and our guests this evening have received in advance of the meeting. So we will be doing an overview, but then giving council an opportunity to ask any questions. We will not be going through all of the recommendations in detail. It would probably take us several hours just to do that, but we did want to give council and the community an opportunity to understand the actions that have been taken since the recommendations first came to council. The other 2 major points is we're looking at trying to get council to confirm the way we intend to fund growth. In February of this year, we had an opportunity to meet as a group, and council had an opportunity to discuss a comprehensive growth strategy. At that time, council directed administration that the way for our economic prosperity for our community was through investing in growth. And at that time, we identified that there were a number of investments that were going to be required. We had to invest in our residential housing stock. We had to look at lands for increased commercial and industrial growth. There were a number of major investments that had to be taken into account. Today, what we like to talk about or get some direction from council is how we best fund that growth strategy. The third piece is to try and get clarification from council and direction on a piece that dovetails into that, and that's balancing our service levels with our financial challenges. The Economic Recovery Task Force has given us a great opportunity to dive into the economic impact of COVID. We've also looked at how, over the past several months, how COVID has impacted our vulnerable populations and how we've had to invest in a number of services to support that activity. So we're going to be looking at this in the context of how council feels we should be best balancing the service levels with our financial targets. And often there's a number of conflicting issues that have to be taken into account. And really, at the end of the day, this is one of council's fundamental roles, is to set the levels of service that the community needs and balancing that with the financial challenges that creates for our taxpayers. So we'll be trying to provide council with a comprehensive understanding of how all of those come together, and we're looking forward to your inputs. Next slide, please. So there should be a slide coming up for you in a moment. It's a slide that was shared with council in February. It basically looks at our projected growth. The bottom line that runs from 2016 to 2046, it's almost flat. That was our projected growth if we chose not to take any additional actions. At the time that we determined in February that wasn't acceptable, that would cause additional challenges for us. The target that council chose in February was looking at a 1% growth target. That's the one in orange in the middle of the two lines. And what we're looking at today is staff's done some extrapolation of what that would look like in terms of the required investment to support 1% growth. Next slide, please. Okay. With that, council, those are our three major activities we want to do today. At this time, I'd like to invite Michael Grail to provide some comments from the perspective of the Economic Recovery Task Force. And I believe Rocky's on the line as well as the other co-chair. Michael, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Good evening, Mayor, Council, and Administration. Rocky and I would like to begin by thanking you for the careful consideration you have given to the We Are CK Task Force report. I know each sector co-chair was appreciative to meet with executive management and topic experts to prioritize their concerns. Many of the sector co-chairs are watching tonight. If council does have a question for them, a process is set up where they can email in a response. This is a very important evening for the future of CK. We have met with administration and reviewed all the background material for this meeting. With the content that has been provided to council, you have the ability to create a playbook in order to build sustainable policy and program decisions to grow CK. As council, you are in the position to identify and approve what our taxes will be, our level of service, and how we invest in growth. We know these are complex decisions, compounded even more with COVID. But while COVID exists and continues to be a crisis, we also see it as an opportunity. It's an opportunity to reflect and to ask, what do we need to continue to do? What can we stop doing? And how can we do things differently in order to improve? As you begin your discussions this evening, we have three messages. The first, investing in growth is critical and urgent even during COVID. As a council, you adopted the growth strategy, and I now challenge you to move this forward and identify how to fund growth. Secondly, think long-term and be committed to that. For this to succeed, it's important that council carefully consider all the different ways growth can be funded, We suspect that a hybrid model that offers a combination of different funding streams will allow for the desired growth, as well as keeping it affordable with minimal impact to tax rates. It's things like adopting development charges. While there'll be some resistance, this only helps the taxpayer by allowing growth to pay for growth. Borrowing. Now is the time. The rates are historically low and the need is urgent. Development in CK is currently at a record pace. However, we know that this cannot continue at this torrent pace without additional infrastructure investments. Consider getting ahead of this demand and make decisions that will fuel development and growth for many years to come. Proactive versus reactive. Be the ones to pave the road, not follow behind filling potholes. We have very limited shovel-ready lands for industry, commercial, and even residential. Let's not turn away businesses and families who want to move to or expand in CK. Review service levels. Chatham-Kent was amalgamated over 20 years ago, yet little infrastructure has changed. You have stated in your term of priorities that you want to right-size infrastructure. COVID has shown us that existing services may not need to occur in person. Offering a right-sized portion for service levels is timely, given today's provincial announcement of Ontario officially entering the second wave. This all but demands important changes that need to occur in order to weather yet another COVID event. This means looking at service entities, municipal information desks, arenas, and libraries. This means evaluating duplications and redundancies in the current environment. Consider consolidating these or repurpose them. Work with the communities to identify what is truly the heart of the community and what needs to be kept. People have developed new habits and adapted to a new normal. This is your opportunity to break the status quo and run models based on efficiencies, effectiveness, and cost savings. And third, growth will undoubtedly require additional taxation. However, it offers a long-term return on investment. Yes, growth will have a cost, but what is the alternative? Continuing to increase taxes for the current level of services just doesn't make good fiscal sense. Investing in growth allows for increased development. It encourages businesses and people to locate here. For example, by investing in high-speed fiber, CK is poised to be one of the best places to work remotely, which will welcome new people who want to leave higher density locations. Investment in water, wastewater, or gas allows new and existing businesses the ability to expand. These examples in investments support the three specified targets of increasing the population, job growth, and new tax assessment. Taxpayers cannot continue to pay increasing rates unless it results in tangible advantages to them in the near future. Growth allows the cost of service to be shared over a larger tax base. And targeting a zero-based budget would ultimately mean significant service cuts with little or no growth occurring. The proper balance between budget and services can occur when infrastructure is right-sized. I said this last time, but I believe it's important to say again. History shows that life is filled with defining moments. The municipality has excelled in protecting us through COVID. The bigger question now is how will you help people's futures livelihoods? Right or wrong, we will be judged on our actions or inactions during this crisis and afterwards. As we transition to the business advisory group, we are here for you as a resource and here to offer our support. We welcome your questions and are willing to be involved in any way to help CK recover and grow. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Can you hear me? Thank you, Michael. I'm going to pass it over to Dr. April Reedike, who's going to provide an update on what the municipality has been doing in relation to the task force report. April?
Thank you, Karen, and thank you, Michael and Rocky. Certainly, as everyone already has indicated, COVID has been a very difficult time both for the people in our community, the businesses and organizations in our community, and the municipality as well. And we've all kind of weathered certainly the last 7 months. With that, the municipality certainly has responded to this crisis, both to protect people's lives and to support everyone's livelihoods as best we have been able to do over the last 7 months. The timeline that's on the screen, we certainly don't have time tonight to go through this kind of item by item, but it does provide a snapshot of what activities have occurred. And certainly Karen has provided this timeline in the background material that has been handed out for tonight. When Council asked us to review the task force report, we did that really in a number of ways. Certainly we assessed the comments. We took all of the feedback and looked at what was occurring or what was planned in all of our various departments and divisions. We met with each sector group. Some groups had multiple people involved, others it was the chairs and co-chairs. Some sectors met once, others it took multiple meetings were required to tease out the recommendations that we are presenting here tonight. We had discussion with them about what had changed since the task force met. And while it seems like months and months ago, it certainly was not that long ago that we embarked on this journey called COVID-19. We talked about identifying key priorities, and then from all of those meetings, the CK COVID Economic Recovery Municipal Response Report was created, and we have shared that for Council to review in depth. From the task force report and every conversation that has been had, we have looked at 3 key priorities or cross-cutting themes that have emerged. Certainly, number 1 is the need for high-speed internet. Number 2 is support financially, and the desire to continue to be engaged. Chatham-Kent has a significant digital divide, and we heard that as well in the report on the human and social impacts of COVID-19 last week at Council. There are some people who have great access and others who don't. Some have dial-up, others have high speed, some folks have fiber, but it certainly changes throughout the community. The divide is based on where you live, your ability to pay, and now even that digital divide is based on your knowledge of how to use the internet and access programs and services that we all require in our day-to-day lives. Council has supported many high-speed broadband projects through in-kind engineering permits, supporting grant applications, identifying opportunities for further partnership. And to further advance the work and timeline, Council will receive a 2021 budget request to extend the free permitting for fiber facilities across CK. It's no surprise that financial support is a priority, as many people have lost jobs, businesses and organizations were closed, whole sectors like tourism and arts and culture were shuttered. Some of the information that we continued to hear included asks for grants, defer or forgive taxes, and to keep our taxes low. In response to this, Council approved multiple supports as shown on the screen, and on August 10th, directed administration to prepare for a zero-based budget. Every time we had the opportunity to meet with members of the task force, they offered their support and they asked to continue to be engaged, to support enhanced communications, and to achieve some of Council's priorities. Specifically, the voice of the community is reflected in municipal decision-making, and welcome continued collaborative partnership to advance the vision of CK. We are coming tonight recommending that a community engagement policy and toolkit be created. This will direct staff to clarify the purpose of engagement and create appropriate strategies. One of those being to ensure communication is done through an equity lens, and that communication also reaches into our vulnerable populations. Through discussion with the sector co-chairs, it was identified that municipal help was still needed. Support local was certainly another of the common themes that was presented in all of our meetings. From this, administration will present to Council an amended purchasing policy to support local while still complying with all of the legal requirements. Our small business and entrepreneur sector spoke positively of the Digital Main Street program, but then also expressed concerns around the criteria that businesses must be within that 1 kilometer radius from downtown. It is recommended that if COVID funding allows, Council should allocate $250,000 to expand this program that is showing some very, very positive results. Through discussions, and I think Dawn mentioned it right at the beginning, the challenge of housing was presented numerous times, specifically affordable housing. And while the market drives development, we know that the average price of homes sold in Chatham in Chatham-Kent in August was a record $325,526. Certainly significantly higher than just a year or two ago. This amount is unattainable for many people. It makes it much harder for young people to enter the housing market. And we recommend that we look at how we can expand the existing home ownership program. This is a program administered by Housing Services to help people become first-time home buyers. And once they are in that market, then they continue to contribute to the community, moving things forward, and really planting down roots here in CK. And our last recommendation is supporting the nonprofit sector. Through discussions, it was learned that there are multiple tools existing that can connect organizations and connect that entire sector together for the purpose of information sharing, access to programs, services, and each other, and navigation around our community. But many of the groups that came forward within the nonprofit sector were unaware of any of this even existing. Therefore, funding is being requested to support the promotion and marketing of a centralized resource. So this is the end of my summary, and I would like to note that each of the areas suggested will come back to Council in formal reports. And I would also like to add my thanks to the task force. I was able to meet with several of the sectors, and it has certainly helped shape some of my thoughts on how even my own department and the divisions within Community Human Services will provide our services going forward. So I'll now pass it back to Karen and see if there's any questions. And if there are questions, I will rely on my EMT colleagues to help if it's a question regarding one of the sectors that they had the opportunity to meet with. Thanks, Karen.
Quinton? Yeah. Hi, thank you, Dr. Redike. Just for our IT support, I do have a phone dial in my head at the same time as I'm talking. So I'll let you sort that out. I just ask council if you have any questions, just put your thumb up in the question mark and we will pass it on to you. Okay, hearing no questions, I'm going to move on to Don Shropshire, our CAO, to continue. And Don, I'd just like you to speak to the task force recommendation number 4.
Thanks. We wanted to be clear with both council and the audience. We recognize there's certain things we did not have time in the agenda this evening to consider. So just to give you a brief update on those, the purchasing policy RTC will be coming to council at our next council meeting in October. Similarly, there's some issues related to that deal with delegation of authority. That fulsome discussion can't be dealt with in one report or in this evening's meeting, but to let you know that we are working ahead on that. We've also looked at the Land Development Corporation. We believe that is complicated enough or complex enough to warrant having an education session with council to provide some additional background information. And again, we just didn't have time for that this evening. So I just wanted to give council and the committee chairs an acknowledgement that we are working on those things, but we just could not deal with it this evening. Thank you, Karen. I'm going to now turn it over to Bruce, and he's going to take you through the next session.
Thank you, Don. So as Don mentioned, council approved the growth strategy in the new community improvement plan back in February and March of this year. Then obviously COVID hit. What was interesting to hear from the task force is that they had a very clear focus on help for the short term, but also had a view to how CK should be planning for growth in the longer term. The task force spoke to things like needing to increase our population, to have jobs here for people, and to ensure there are services that support our quality of life. So this all aligned closely with the targets that council approved in February this year. I won't read all those again. I know council's seen them several times, but it does prompt the question, does COVID impact how fast we want to accelerate growth? Should our approach change because of COVID? To help answer this, we've provided you with the primer that speaks to the current trends in growth, which was attached to the report. When we consider the municipal role in growth, we can break it down into these 3 areas: supporting the market demand, planning for the long term, and financing and investing in growth. They help us look at where our resources should be allocated and are most needed. As we support market demand, we have seen over the last couple of years, especially 2019 had the most residential building permits we've seen here in over 20 years. And even with COVID, 2020 is on track to match 2019 in terms of total residential permits, but has already surpassed in terms of new residential dwelling units. For example, there are more in terms of multiple residential dwellings and apartment growth. Based on consultations we've been having with developers, we're certainly anticipating that 2021 will be even a stronger year in terms of new residential growth, including a number of new multi-residential developments expected to come through the approval process soon and to start construction in early 2021. On the industrial side, in the past year, the municipalities made infrastructure investments in both the Bloomfield and Blenheim business parks that the municipality owns to ensure additional shovel-ready industrial lands are available for development. The Bloomfield Business Park, actually, the Prosperity Way and servicing is being extended as we speak. So this will bring approximately an additional 35 acres of service land online. In addition, in the past few months, there was also a 30-acre privately owned industrial subdivision approved by council in Chatham, and it is currently under development as well. It will soon be. With this good news, you might be asking, why do we need to focus on this? At the council strategy session back in January, we reviewed several case scenarios. Some of these included businesses who would not locate in Chatham-Kent because it would take too long to have the land ready to open their business. Therefore, we certainly need to watch what the market wants. In most cases, they don't want to wait almost 2 years for the infrastructure to be constructed and ready. The graphic on this slide provides a general time frame for a typical infrastructure project, but it can sometimes take longer depending on the size and scale of the type of project we're talking about. Do we currently know where the market-driven growth is occurring? Generally speaking, we do, for sure. The most predominant area, and people can drive around and see it for themselves for sure, is within Chatham, which includes the 2 largest designated growth areas, primarily in the southwest quadrant of Chatham and the northwest quadrant of Chatham. However, we are certainly seeing some growth in inquiries in other communities as well, more so than we've seen in years past, for sure. We are recommending that we begin and continue to review our existing designated growth areas within the various urban centers to look at the level of what we'll call shovel readiness and identify all infrastructure constraints to development. Specifically, we want to take more specific infrastructure servicing reviews in these areas to look at infrastructure, including things like water, wastewater, roads, transportation, stormwater, etc. Prioritizing growth-related core infrastructure investments in these strategic locations and identification of projected capital costs. Some of this work has already been completed, such as the Transportation Master Plan earlier this year. So the bigger question is, if we're going to continue to support growing development, what is the cost? As an example, the southwest quadrant, as I spoke of earlier, is the municipality's largest and currently the most active growth area. In this area alone, anticipated road upgrades are in the neighborhood of around 21 million over the next 5 years. Water, wastewater, and stormwater upgrades are also necessary in this area over the next several years as well. Obviously, we should prioritize infrastructure investments with the market demand. So this slide represents a rough calculation of what a 1% growth rate looks like. Essentially, this would mean adding in just under another 10,000 people over the next 10 years. And just under 5,000 dwelling units, assuming the average of 2.3 people per unit. So this roughly translates into approximately 477 units per year. We will approach this number in 2020 and probably surpass it in 2021 based on our current projections. But is it sustainable over the longer term without further investments in growth? Again, this is just a rough estimate, but it gives you an idea of what would be required. For perspective, based on forecasted growth in the Watson Growth Report from last December, it had identified housing demand was about 3,700 units over 25 years at a 0.1% growth per year rate. So certainly the new growth strategy is much more aggressive in nature for sure. So obviously when we're looking at investments, obviously the first choice is to focus on where we already have infrastructure to maximize the investment already. But obviously we should also be prioritizing investments with the market demand that we're hearing is out there. That's it. So one last thing, cost for growth is not just about infrastructure. We also need to ensure our internal development and review service functions can continue to meet market demand and allocate the necessary resources to support further long-range planning. And I'm not just talking here about the planning department, but also the building, engineering departments that all support development review as we go forward. Currently, CK spending on its planning function is one of the lowest in Ontario, and this has been relatively consistent over the years. While the immediate focus should be on review of existing growth areas, the next phase of our official plan update, which we anticipate will begin in 2021, will review potential growth options beyond designated growth areas, along with the magnitude and timing of future capital investments in infrastructure. We also need to take into account planning for other impacts, such as climate change, natural hazard work that we've already started, i.e. our shoreline areas, etc. With that, I'll pass it back to Karen to see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Bruce. Maybe what we'll do at this time is we do have 2 questions. So I will ask Councillor Harrigan if she would like to put her question on the floor.
Hi, Karen. It's Councillor Harrigan. My hand was not raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, Councillor Pinsino. Or maybe I'm looking at the wrong. I'm looking at the wrong thing. This is my first night looking at the screen. So I believe Councillor Sakatchi has a question.
Thank you, Karen. To Mr. McAllister, I just wanted to touch base. So I know there's a lot of focus right now on Chatham centric. So what can we do as a municipality to start, promoting our areas outside of the central aspect? I know that the developers, are choosing that to utilize that because the 401. We also have a lot of communities along the 401 that could benefit from growth as well. Is there anything that we can do from a municipality to better, promote those areas for growing as well?
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Sakatchi. As I mentioned in the one side very briefly, we are starting to see that. We are starting to see growth in some of our other communities as well. I know we've got several proposals and inquiries that are looking to various communities, whether it be, the Tilburys, the Blenheims, even the Bothwells that haven't seen traditionally a lot of growth over the past number of years. Certainly, we're working on that promotional aspect as well throughout the various departments to further encourage people to come to Chatham-Kent, whether it be Chatham or any of the other communities in Chatham-Kent.
Thank you, Mr. McAllister. I guess the one point I do want to make too, though, I guess it does make sense from a council standpoint to be promoting the areas that are growing the most, because to invest in those areas, because we want to make sure we're getting the most bang for our buck, so to speak, and ensuring that we're capturing all the aspects of growing in those particular areas, so we can maximize our investment in certain areas. So I greatly appreciate your slides. It was very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Bond, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mary Caniff. Bruce, I'm wondering, we're talking a lot about new development, and that's where the growth is, of course, naturally, but could you give your thoughts on the elevated real estate cost of existing residential real estate in Chatham, particularly, as it's gone a little, well, I'd say crazy good, I guess, but is that just a lack of inventory? And if that's the case, frankly, where are these people coming from? People say it's Toronto. I guess maybe that's likely the case, but your thoughts on existing real estate, and is retail well, mainly just retail, like strip malls, is the increase in real estate costs, is it comparable to, is residential and retail, like the strip malls, etc., are they hand in hand, or is there a big difference? Because maybe I'm wrong, but I just see that the existing real estate costs have gone really high in the last 10 years. So not the last 6 months or so, but just your thoughts on that, Bruce. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bondy. To your first point, I think that the costs are a little bit of both. It's certainly, I think you're seeing rising housing prices across the province, frankly, here in Chatham-Kent as well. But also, I think the demand in further introducing more housing stock is important to that as well. I think there's been pent-up demand over the past few years, and that's why I showed you that graph. We have seen those permits increase. Really, to be honest, we started to see an increase probably in 2017, and then a gradual uptake in 2018 for sure, and then obviously last year, and then this year, and in the next year as well. So I think there's certainly pent-up demand. I would suggest as more stock comes online, maybe that the pricing may moderate at some point. But That being said, we're still very competitive when you compare us to other areas of the province. And that'd be your second question. Anecdotally, what we're hearing is certainly there are people relocating here from other parts of the province for various reasons. One being, even though we do tend to see our prices going up, they're still, very, I guess cheap's not the right word, but they're compared to other areas of the province, it's still very economic for people to move to Chatham-Kent for sure. And your last point, again, maybe I didn't quite understand that. Were you asking do I see the retail market following along with residential, Councillor Bonney? Maybe I can just ask for a clarification on that.
Yeah, sure, Bruce. I guess the question is, residential housing prices have, doubled, tripled in some cases. Would that be the same for, say, a variety store or a store in King Street? A commercial building. Have they seen the same increased value that residential has seen in the last couple of years?
Okay, well, I certainly don't have any numbers right in front of me. I can suggest to you they have not. The housing market has certainly increased at a greater factor than the commercial sector. And again, I guess that's one of the things, especially on the retail side. What are the impacts of COVID going forward on that sector?
Yes, I'm seeing the same thing. Okay, great. Thanks very much, Bruce. Appreciate it.
Councillor Solomon?
Okay, thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to ask a question of Bruce, and maybe it's not even Bruce, and then I have a comment. I understood that our Economic Development Department does not, in its promotes all of Chatham-Kent equally. And it's the buyers and developers who decide which location is the one that fits their pistol. Correct?
Councillor Solomon, it's Don Shropshire speaking. That is correct. The largest single comments we're getting from people that are purchasing employment lands is that they want to build where they have access to a labor force. That's been it used to be land prices a couple of years ago or proximity to the 401. Now they're wanting to make sure that they've got a workforce that can accommodate their requirements. The other piece that we've heard from a number of local businesses is that they could grow their business faster if they had additional accommodations to house their workforce. So those two factors that's part of what's driven some of the increased growth in not only Chatham, but also in Dresden and Blenheim and Merlin and Tilbury. We have actually seen some increased growth.
You see, I see us as a region, as a regional economy, and it's up to the developers and the plant owners, if we're fortunate enough to get any, to decide where they want to locate, because it's an easy commute from any part of Chatham-Kent to the center of Chatham-Kent, and everybody benefits that way. So I've failed for 25 years to see what the difference is where the plant locates or the employer locates, since everyone benefits.
And that's exactly been the approach that's taken by economic development.
That's what I thought.
We'll find out what the business owner wants. Yeah.
Okay, so my comment was that most of the growth that we've seen in the last couple of years has been, and granted, there's a casino and there's some other buildings that have gone on, but a lot of it's residential growth that hadn't gone on for a long, long time. I'm sitting in my office right now at the corner of Park Avenue and Howard, and to my west, there's a huge subdivision being developed, as you know, at Bloomfield and Park Avenue. To the east, Pirelli Developments is developing an apartment complex approved by the municipality several months ago. Today, one of the largest, Southwestern Ontario's largest residential owners of multi-res acquired some land in Chatham. And we heard during the discussion of the temporary homeless shelter that some other developer was seeking to acquire some land in the Merritt Kyle area. So we've had a lot of. We were so fearful a year ago about not having sufficient rental units available. It looks like we're well on the way to having cured that already. And we certainly have a lot of single-family residential development going on right now in the old Sugar Beet area, whatever that's called now. And well, as I say, to the west of my office here. So all that's a success. But I assume again that if you want to put you're a developer and you want to put a lot of money into multi-residential buildings, you look at some economy of scale too. You're going to want to go, just as you said, to where the population is. And that's what I think we've been experiencing in the last year now. And with more to come, apparently. Anybody comment on that? Bruce, Don? Apparently not.
Yep, sorry. Sorry, Bruce here, Councillor Solomon.
Were you with that comment, did I?
No,
Okay, go ahead.
sorry. Anyways, no, very good points. And I think one thing that's important to understand here as well, I know I was involved when we did the last official plan review 5 years ago. And one of the things we did at the time, because there really wasn't demand, was we held the boundaries where they were. What we've seen happen is we've seen developers really now look to areas that are already serviced, properties that are within the urban core. And we're seeing a lot of developers capitalize on that without a significant investment from the municipality because the infrastructure is there. As you mentioned, several of the examples we just talked about, and a lot of them are very conducive to multi-residential developments. Eventually, those opportunities we're not going to see those anymore because the lands are going to be utilized. So this is where we're talking about kind of the next few years. Where do we need to grow and where do we need to invest?
Okay, so just a couple final comments. If I look to the south from the other window, I have a corner view here. There's another development going on on Indian Creek Road, which will ultimately join Kyle Drive to Indian Creek Road. And apparently they're looking at more expansion in that area too. So I think we're doing pretty well in the residential side. My concern is twofold, and that is we're not seeing it in the manufacturing side, industrial side, nor are we seeing it in the commercial side. As I look across at Park Avenue and the corner of Park Avenue and Howard, that's all zoned commercial. And it's sat now for 30 years that way. And that's my concern, is that that's the kind of development we should be looking for. I think some of the residential is going along pretty well now. But and in that respect, one of the decisions that we also, I think, have to make is, it's great that people are buying these houses and building houses. And it's great that for the sellers, that the prices, average price is over $300,000. But some of these people are now finding out that the taxes on the properties that they bought are much higher than they expected. And if they've moved from out of town, I've heard complaints about, well, yeah, sure, I got a bag of money when I left the GTA, but I certainly didn't pay the kind of property taxes as I'm paying here. I think we got to keep a close eye on that because certainly on the commercial side, the taxes are high, and on the industrial side as well. And that's how people make decisions if they're going to have commercial property or an industrial property. That's one of the factors. It's not just labor, it's how much am I going to be paying in taxes? Anyway, those are my comments.
Thank you, Councillor Solomon. As Don speaking, that's actually a great segue into some of the work that we're going to do over the course of the next 45 minutes or so, trying to strike that right balance between our property taxes and our cost of investment. So with that, I will, if there's no more questions, I was going to ask if we can move to Gord Quinton and have him talk about investment. Thank you very much.
So, Don, I just want to add something to what Councillor Solomon was talking about. It's wonderful we're getting the growth residentially, and that will be driving the growth commercially and industrially from an industrial perspective. As we get more people here, they're going to be shopping for cars, and they're going to be going to grocery stores and clothing stores and all those things, which will drive more commercial, as well as we move forward. All municipalities have land, but it's the people, it's the workforce. So as we attract more people, there will be people here to attract more industry here. So it's the starting point of those other points. I just want to add that. Thanks. Okay, go ahead, Don.
Thanks, Darren. It's Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer. I agree, Darren, with what you just said out there at the end. It's often the industries are looking for the people first now, and to have a larger population base to pull workers from will help those decisions. So I'm going to talk about a little bit on how we're going to pay for this growth. And so normally the slide that's on the screen, the ways to invest in growth. As Bruce mentioned, growth does have a large cost, and we see significant costs to expand the ability for growth over the next few years. But there's also a return on investment that's a benefit to all Chatham-Kent residents from this growth. There are 4 ways to invest in growth that are shown on the screen. I'll talk about development charges in a bit, but sort of going backwards on the screen, senior level funding is always ideal if we can get grants from the federal or provincial government, but there's no guarantee when or how much is on its way. And with the recent throne speech, we heard from the federal government that they're looking for ways on how to support for increased jobs and recovery out of COVID-19. So oftentimes there will be infrastructure stimulus packages that we potentially want to be ready to apply for and have shovel-ready projects on the go if that comes down the road. But just to be clear, we can't count on a dime to pay for growth coming from the senior levels of government. We can hope for it, but we can't count on it. So then we're left with the other ways. We can look at cuts to current service levels to fund some of that growth, where Chatham-Kent might be supplying a service that's no longer necessary or where the demand has fallen. And we can also look to save monies in areas and reinvest it into the growth plan. And not listed on the previous slide, not listed on the slide, but definitely an option for council is for you to raise new taxes on existing taxpayers to pay for growth. Just to be clear, we are not recommending that option, but that would be a decision of council. So concerning development charges, development charges are a tool in which the municipality can charge a fee with every new building that's constructed to have growth pay for at least a portion of the growth costs. Currently, all growth costs have come out of the other 3 sources on the previous slide, being upper level funding, which is now rare, cutting existing services, or raising taxes. Currently, the PUC does collect approximately $5,200 per house in development charges for certain water and wastewater related infrastructure. But the municipality is not currently collecting anything for the other types of infrastructure, such as roads or storm sewers, for example, that is needed to support the growth in Chatham-Kent. This currently comes from the tax base and impacts all ratepayers. It's reaction-based, not proactive, and is not the way for a municipality this size to operate. It is highly recommended that Chatham-Kent consider introducing some additional development charges to have a portion of growth pay for growth in order to help expedite needed infrastructure spending. You may think that the development community would be against development charges, as it basically raises the cost for a finished home. The statement is false and has been proven false in both high and low growth areas across the province. Developers are much more concerned with having the arterial roads and the services in place so that their developments can proceed rather than waiting 20 years for the municipality to catch up. The delays in planning ahead add far more long-term cost to new homeowners than the cost of the development charge that we'd be implementing now. So administration is recommending that the municipality move forward with a development charge background study, the first step. The final decision, if the corporation will enact further development charges beyond water and wastewater, is council's decision once that background study is complete. And as expected, the results of the study will go to council in the spring of 2021 for a final vote on implementation. The goal is to no longer have the full burden on the existing ratepayer, which I hope every resident of Chatham-Kent, current resident of Chatham-Kent, is happy to hear. You will receive a report from Bruce and I recommending moving ahead with the background study on the October 19th council meeting. Next slide, please. Of course, when you're behind in building out in front of the growth, where Chatham-Kent is currently at, you need a significant outflow of cash to get caught up. Debt and development charges support the model adopted across Ontario for growth paying for growth with reduced impact on existing taxpayers. By supporting growth investments, council will enable assessment growth to rise closer to our target of 1.5% of taxes annually. Administration supports and highly recommends the issuance of approximately 100 to 125 million in new debentures over the next 5 years to support the growth plan, the Public Utilities Commission's plant renewal plans, and the potential sports complex when upper funding becomes available. Chatham-Kent is in an excellent financial position. Our current debt to reserves ratio is currently 0.3 and will safely stay below the ideal ratio of 1:1 under this plan. And by supporting growth investments, council will enable assessment growth to rise closer to the target of 1.5% taxes. And by using a combination of debentures and implementing development charges, growth can be spurred, making the impact on existing taxpayers quite minimal and have an excellent return on the investment. Next slide, please. By having this high growth, there will be additional operating costs to service the additional residents that should never be forgotten. For example, there may be more roads to maintain and to plow in the winter, for example. However, more population will require more commercial businesses as well to provide services, which will multiply into even more taxation and jobs, attracting more residents and allow municipal costs to be spread over more people. And this is where it provides us that return on investment exponentially and will have an eventual impact on the taxes each one of us pay, as Councillor Solomon just pointed out. With the larger population spread costs over, the opportunity to invest in more amenities will be easier for future councils to afford. And with more housing choices in Chatham-Kent, there will be a potential to free up some existing housing stock for more affordable housing for those that are really in need. With the current trends to get out of large population centers, now is the time to act to make sure we can keep up with the developer demands. This trend will continue well after COVID-19 and for the next decade, as work from home is now becoming the new normal, and locating in the GTA, for example, it may not be necessarily anymore for a job. On the slide that you'll see, in the average year, our current budget projections are for inflation plus the asset management plan funding are roughly 3 to 3.5%, depending on the year. The growth plan has 3-year needs of approximately $60 million of investments, which would require a 20-year debenture resulting in $4 million of annual debt repayment requirements. That would be close to another 3% tax increase. So now we're getting close to 6% budget increases if we simply funded these improvements from the current taxpayer, and nobody is recommending that. If council would adopt the development charges to have growth pay for a portion of growth, Chatham could collect estimated 2% of that through development charges and lower the tax impact, and the rise in the new assessment growth achievable will offset even more. So in conclusion, supporting the growth plan will should require only a small portion of existing tax-based funding, if any, and that could the amount that is needed could be phased in over a 2 or 3 year period to have minimal impact. However, council has indicated on the August 10th meeting where they passed a motion to have us look for 0% tax increase. To achieve a 0% tax increase, there would need to be a significant service level change. And as your chief financial officer, I understand the task force general requests for low taxes. And I also understand the community's demands to not cut services. But to be clear, I 100% support the direction of the growth plan expenditures and for development charges to pay for them. And no matter where we head in the 2021 budget, I hope council will support that plan. Council, we need your clear direction tonight. Chatham-Kent is very healthy financially, and we can potentially absorb a 1 year hit to approach 0% by depleting reserves. I normally never recommend that. However, if there ever was a rainy day where we were, which we were saving our reserves for, 2020 might be it. If you're looking for lower than 3% out into the future beyond 2021, we do need to cut service levels where the demand is low and rebalance our levels of services. There's really a balancing act between closing a great deal of existing services to get to 0% now that impacts existing residents, or understand that around that 3% is the new normal across all of Ontario, with how we currently are charged from the provincial government for many of our social services that we provide. And so we have that balancing act. If we want 0, it will impact existing services. And what we really need to focus on is this growth that will help spread the costs over a greater population going forward. Sorry about confusing that last part. I'll pass it back to Karen to see if there's any questions.
Councillor Kirkwood-White, you had a question?
I did. Thank you, Your Worship. Gord, I'm trying to understand how the issuance of debentures work and wondering whether the 100,000 to 125 million includes the 57 that we currently owe on our debt, so that you're only borrowing the difference between what we already owe and the number that you're recommending.
No, the 57 million of current debt you're referring to, only about 10 of that is on the books as far as taxpayers paying. The rest is either subsidized by the provincial government in the case of Riverview Gardens, where 2/3 of our debt payments come back in grants from the province, or it's on the PUC's books that's charged to the rate base.
Okay.
So this will take this expenditures and growth, and we're talking around the 50 to 60 million over the next 3-year period. It is back-ended where we need to plan for that growth now. We need to begin both the planning exercise and eventually the engineering work to plan that out. But the actual expenditures will likely be more around the 2023, 2024 area. So by time that happens, that 57 million will be down in the $25 million range as we pay about 11 or 12 million off a year in our current levels of debts. In fact, Riverview Gardens, for example, will be totally paid for in 2024. So we actually have very little tax-based debt moving forward past 2024, and that's when we're saying that a portion of this investment will be for roads and storm sewers and items that are the responsibility of taxpayers. But there also needs to be significant investments in other underground work, such as sewers and pumping stations and water mains that would be paid out of that current water and wastewater development charges that we've charged all along in Chatham-Kent. So it's the 60 million I'm talking is total debt, but the tax-based portion of that might be approximately half of that, and would really be manageable if we implemented development charges for our main core services that municipalities provide.
Okay, thank you. And the interest rate, I presume, is very low at this point on the debentures?
It is basically at a, I would say a record low pretty well. We could borrow a 20-year debenture for under 2.5%. That's a huge difference from when, 10 years ago when we were borrowing at 6%. It does make it, this is the opportune time to borrow for some of these significant capital expenditures that we're looking at under the growth plan.
And when was the last time we issued debentures?
Our last time is when we completed the Bradley Center in 2013, when we issued about a $7.5 million debenture.
Okay.
So in 2010, we hit our what I'd say is a high for Chatham-Kent, where we had $162 million of debt outstanding. As you mentioned, we're down to 57 million now. Heading down to around 25 million in 2024 when this large borrowing would begin to take place. And when I talked about the 100 to 125 million, that was more in the 10-year range. So, we'll be paying down debt as we go through that annually as well. So I'm not expecting us to really ever peak over the $100 million debt outstanding at a time. It's because we'll have paid back a significant portion of that debt payments, hopefully paid through development charges, prior to the year 9 and 10 of that plan, where we're spending even more money.
Okay, thank you. I will be supporting the issuance of debentures.
Councillor Finn, followed by Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just wanting some clarification. Is there going to be a report that lists the service levels that you'd like changed and the reasoning why?
So we are bringing a development charge study recommendation to the October 19th meeting. We really need to have that study done to make final recommendations. You can implement development charge for or the new community benefit charges for a large host of municipal services. For example, you can have development charges in place to build new libraries or recreational centers or fire halls, or to buy more additional ambulances, or any of those capital costs you can look at and consider them in the study. The bare minimum, I would say, that we need Chatham-Kent to implement, currently we have nothing on the taxpayer side. We need to implement at a minimum roads and storm sewer. Chatham-Kent's of course a flat area, and having storm water management is critical, especially with what we know with climate change and projections for the next 100 years ahead. So at a bare minimum, we'll need roads and storm sewers, but we won't be making that detailed of a recommendation on October 19th. We're saying let's do a study and come back with you with the facts and data behind a final recommendation in the spring of 2021.
Okay, and second, I know interest rates are low right now. Will it also be looked at in the remote chance that next year interest rates skyrocket?
So because of COVID-19, currently Bank of Canada would be forecasting basically a flat line on interest rates for the next 3-year period. We're assuming that there's vaccines for COVID sometime in 2021 that, early in the year they'll be available, but by the time they get out to a massively available to everyone that wants one, and before it really shows the fact, we need estimates of 50 to 70% of the population vaccinated before you'll really see the drop in COVID-19. So that's more towards the next fall. And the Bank of Canada is projecting that the economy is going to take a hit much longer than that. It could be 2 to 3 years before there's much of a before we can say that we're out of the woods and have a full recovery. So we think for this initial investment of this 50 to 60 million that we think that needs to be done over the next 3 years, we'll be able to get it in that time frame. If we saw rates were beginning to rise, we could also look at locking in a little bit early on the rates. If provided that we had the expenditures approved and on the go, but perhaps if they were if the work was just beginning and it was a 6-month construction project, we could look at debenturing at the front end and try to lock in some of those rates.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the in-depth report there, Gord. I'm curious though, over the last, I guess, 10 years now, I've never seen administration supporting the issuance of debentures. I think even as recently as last year's budget, we were talking about how we don't really support the issuance of debentures. We're all in favor as pay as you go. And I mean, politically, we paid one off and we pushed that money into various areas. So I guess a philosophical question for you. How come administration has changed their mind and are now recommending and supportive of issuing of debentures?
Excellent point, Councillor Thompson, and I need to make a very exact clarification on that. We do not support debentures on replacing the assets that we already have. So for example, 3rd Street Bridge in Chatham is coming towards the end of its useful life, and we need to replace it in, I'm not sure if it's 2021, 2022 when the construction is planned. That may be a $10 to $15 million project. We do not support borrowing money and putting it on future taxpayers to pay for existing infrastructure such as a bridge. In this case, we are saying that to attract growth, it'd be advantageous for us to get ahead of it and not be preventing housing from being built because there's no lots available on proper roads or the waters and sewer lines aren't there yet. So we do support growth, paying for growth, and we see the need because we haven't done too much of this expansion in the last 10 years. we see the need to upfront fund, up to 125 million over the next 10 years to be repaid over the next 20 to 30 years by the new growth that it would attract. So quite clearly, what we're trying to say, if you have, we should have life cycle plans in place to pay for what we have now. We have an issue with that as well, as we're just over 50% funded on the life cycle plan, and we need to get close to 100% on that so that we can maintain what we have. But this is for our new things that we don't have, new roads and trunk water mains and sewers. So that's the distinction that we're trying to make there. This is not replacing what we already have.
Okay, I appreciate that. I'm glad you brought up the life cycle issue, and that we are frankly behind in our life cycle issue, and one could argue that we're going to have to issue debentures there anyway. To go back, and it's splitting hairs a little bit, you say that you are opposed philosophically to issuing debentures for existing infrastructure, and yet in here it's PUC plant renewal, and then somebody decided to throw in the idea of the potential sports complex, even though we got word that we're not getting any money. So to me, again, this is a philosophical change. This is very much issuing debentures to replace existing infrastructure on those final two pieces, at least.
So I'll talk about each of those items separately. So I'll start with the PUC. When, for example, the Wallaceburg, I believe it's the water plant that's being rebuilt over the next couple of years. Top of my head, it's $20 to $30 million. Part of that, you're right. We should have had the PUC, for example, on that example, should have been 100%. Should have had a 100% life cycle budget in place. So for the portion of what was just replacing the old for the renewed, should have been paid for. That portion should have been paid for with existing funding. They're not at 100% funded at the PUC in their asset management plan. They're similar to the municipality, around 50%. So there's a gap there that, but water being such a critical issue, a bridge could be closed. I don't think we can't stop providing clear quality water to our residents. So the PUC has made the decision to go ahead, but the second part of that Wallaceburg construction job will be to make sure you have the expansion capabilities to have enough water to supply the Wallaceburg area for the next 50 years or whatever, or 75 years or whatever the lifespan of the new plan is. So that portion should be paid for by development charges, so that growth again is paying for growth, and that is part of the PUC plan, who has had development charges all along. I'll give you an example of a road, for a Howard Road rebuild to a proper arterial road specs. We're saying that the southwest quadrant of Chatham the new houses, we should have a portion of that pay for that. Yes, there's the existing surface treated with no curbs, open ditch, a road there, but that doesn't, and we do maintain that. We resurface that every 10 years or whenever it's needed. This is going to a different level when we rebuild that road at a great cost, starting from scratch, rebuilding the road, rebuilding the base, putting what the water and sewer mains below it, putting curb and gutter, putting the drainage systems in for the ditch, and closing that and making that a developable area. We're talking about there's a new school going in on Tweedsmuir on a part of the road that hasn't been built yet. That would need to be built over to Howard Ave. So all this new area, we see where growth can pay for growth. Back to the arena. If you just want an ice pad.
Gord, it's Karen here. This is, if you remember at the beginning, I said I was going to have the not fun task of interrupting people. So I'm going to take the liberty to do that. And I think what Councillor Thompson has done is given us an insight of how we need to continue this conversation, actually.
Okay.
So I'll ask you to wrap up, and then we're going to move on to an exercise that's going to, I think, help even answer some of this stuff.
I think I just want to touch. I don't want to leave this works black hanging, so I'll do the quick version on that. If you're just wanting to place an ice pad, it's pretty cheap to do. We could do that on the existing taxes. If you just need an ice pad, $5 million will do the job to build an ice pad. If you're wanting a sports complex that seats 2,500 people or whatever council desires, that's an enhanced level of service with enhanced amenities where development charges could help pay for.
All right, I will be quick with my final comment. I'm very much opposed to issuing debentures. I think we've seen the good work that we've done paying those down and the benefits we've reaped from there. And despite the fact that interest rates are at historic lows and are expected to stay there, quick math is that borrowing that money adds 33% to the overall cost, which would still then basically require 33% more to be collected from development charges and from taxation. And I'll leave it at that point.
Thank you, Council, and thank you, Gord.
Oh, so
we have more questions. I was trying to be mean, Mr. Mayor, and wrap up this section. So this is the delicate balance between not only our next exercise called the balancing exercise, but also me as the facilitator and you as the mayor. So I'm wondering if Councillor McGregor and Councillor Bondi would allow us some leniency to move on to the next exercise, keeping in mind that this really needs a full conversation back at council. And we knew that each one of these topics, whether it was developmental charges or debentures or service changes, we probably could talk about each one for many, many hours. So I'll ask Councillor McGregor and Councillor Bondi if you'll allow that. Thank you very much. I'm going to go on next to our Chief Human Resource Officer and General Manager of Corporate Services, Kathy Hoffman. So she's also going to do some balancing acts with us right now. And we're going to try and walk council through a virtual exercise to talk around the tension between funding growth and achieving a low budget. So thank you, Kathy.
Great, thanks very much, Karen. Good evening, council. So you've heard Gord just talk a little bit now about the balancing act and walked through the various options that you might want to take a look at in terms of being able to fund options for growth or achieving a low increased budget. So when we were preparing for this particular evening, it occurred to us as an administrative group that we were not entirely clear on all of the terms of council's view. And we thought that getting that clarity was pretty critical for us in order to produce a well-guided and meaningful budget product for you to deliberate over this year. So the motivation for this particular exercise is ultimately to get your direction on resolving what we are describing as a palpable tension between funding growth and achieving a low budget increase. You've told us that both are a priority to this point. And so our goal through this exercise is to get some clarity from council on whether one is more of a priority than another for you, and if you have an appetite to consider service reduction options as a method for funding one or both. And then finally, if you do have an appetite for looking at some type of service reductions, are there any particular services you would like us to focus on to come up with those recommendations? Or are there any particular areas that you would absolutely like to make sure that we not focus on as we evolve recommendations for you over the coming months? So our goal is not to persuade you to any particular recommendation we have. It's entirely to hear what your wish is, so we make sure that the time we spend on developing options is well focused. We recognize that some of the examples that we have placed on our slides this evening for discussion, you have talked with us about before, and you've provided us with some previous direction. Given the fact that we've had a number of changes that have taken place in our community since your first strategic session, we have included some in the general way in case your views have changed on any of them, and we simply want to give you an opportunity to weigh back in on whether or not your thoughts and sentiments about direction you've given us previously have changed. As Karen mentioned at the front end of the presentation, and I believe Dawn did as well, we may not get through every one of these slides this evening. We are committed to working to our 8 p.m. timeframe, although we've been moving along very nicely. So what you'll find is we've set this up such that we'll move fairly quickly through some of these slides, perhaps different than most council meetings, insofar as in some of them, we'll be looking really for a quick answer from you. So for example, in a few minutes, I'll be moving to a slide where I will be asking you to just articulate whether or not your priority is growth or achieving a low budget or some equalness of them. And it'll be really looking for you to give kind of a 10 to 20 second answer, and then I'll move to the next member of council alphabetically. So it's a little bit different than having a larger debate style meeting at this point. Since the time of amalgamation, there have been significant changes in our community. And if you imagine them loosely grouped into these three sort of quasi-decade buckets, here are a few of the changes that you've seen over the years. We acknowledge that these changes are dynamic and that have challenged and shaped how we approach our own budgeting over the course of the many years. Councillor Solomon mentioned when he was speaking earlier this evening about developments in the south side of Chatham and referenced various things that have changed. And if you consider, from even just the time of amalgamation where we started perhaps in a climate that was more economically, had more vitality to it. We were seeing some growth, and then we moved through these phases where we're seeing the 2008 manufacturing exodus, consolidation of farms. And if we come up into present day, you've heard plenty about the shifts in population growth and size, slow regrowth economically, given and therefore the importance of the very important work with the Economic Recovery Task Force. And then we've seen changes in demands for our assets and how we use them. And so, for example, perhaps historically where we were once using an arena for purposes that, skating, hockey, et cetera, and so forth, we now might find that our community demand is for things like a multi-use recreation facility or a community center, et cetera. And certainly we've seen an increase in a demand for online services, and that's not been just this particular year during the pandemic, although that has certainly punctuated the point, but we have seen that movement over the last few years to an increased demand for online services and less of a demand for in-person services. So you heard from Gord earlier about the funding options related to growth. I'm not going to go back through those again right now, but these buckets just sort of show you where we categorized them in the early part of the conversation to try to capture that tension between growth and budget from a financial perspective. And so what we wanted to do was walk you through a bit of a model that if you look up here on this left-hand side of your screen where the word growth is, we pictured this as the side of the equation of starting something. We're trying to grow something, we're trying to move towards something. And as discussed, this costs money to grow. On the far right-hand side is the budget. And while it doesn't mean that we're stopping something over here, just for ease, if you'll let us run with this concept for now. Over here, we might have to be stopping something to achieve a desired budget. And on the left-hand side, we know we have to start something to achieve growth. In the middle here, in this inverted triangle, is going to be this collection of municipal services that we have right now. of which we have the opportunity to analyze and decide the extent to which we can utilize any or all of them to help you achieve what you're looking for on one or another side of this equation. The thought is that tonight, as we drill down through the middle of this triangle, and we'll have some examples by department, that we'll be able ultimately to get down to this sharp point of clarity, where we'll get some answers from you about hearing from you about what your priority is, growth or low budget, or are they equal to you? And are you willing to reduce services rather to fund one or both? If we imagine this green bar right here as a little bit of a balance beam with a little bit of inverse option, we'll just go back for 1 second here to show you. If we take a look at this particular example, there may be a situation where you say that your priority is high growth, and that we know by that then that if there are no reduction in services, then we are headed towards a much higher tax rate. Obviously, the reverse may also be true. If you say, actually, I've thought this over, I'm less invested in growth, I have low growth, it will require less costs, and we can get closer to a 0% tax rate in the process. And so all of this is a little bit of a balancing act that we take a look at, trying to figure out on here where exactly you hope to be in figuring out what's important to you. And they could both be a somewhere in the middle as we go through. So what will come in the following conversation is we're going to break down each of the departments. We're going to give you a couple of examples in each one. And then the idea is that we'll discuss with you some of them during the course of this evening and hear from you either in the general sense or in the specific sense, if you're ready, to talk with us about where you're at. So what we'll start with is we'll be reviewing each department for some general and specific service reductions. Each general manager is going to give you a short briefing of what they were thinking, and then I will continue around the table alphabetically to ask for your input. So what we want to do first is I'm going to start first with the question about whether or not, and I'll just go back to this slide for a moment, whether or not your priority is growth, or is it low budget, or do you see them as equal to you? And so to let you know my plan is that each time I'm going to start with Mayor Caniff. In the first pass, I will then go to Councillor Oche. And when we come to the second grouping of questions, I will again start with Mayor Caniff, and this time I'll go in reverse alphabetical order, and I will be starting with Councillor Wright, just so that the same people don't have to go first each time. So once we get through this conversation, as I said, we will get deeper into each department. So I'm going to kick our conversation off now, and I'm going to start first with you, Mayor Caniff. If you can share with us in 10 or 20 seconds your listing of priority, please.
Oh, 10 or 20 seconds, that's a challenge. Certainly growth to me is very important because growth will drive efficiencies and financial prudency in the future. So I would say growth we move ahead with, but we can be financially prudent as well along that way.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I understand Councillor Oche is not with us this evening, so I'll move next to Councillor Bondi.
Hi, thank you, Mayor Caniff and Kathy. I don't believe that funding growth and a low budget have to be opposed to one another. I think we have to fund growth. Obviously, I don't know that this is the time for an arena complex, frankly, and that conversation was stalled, unfortunately, which I think that's a conversation I did receive 2 phone calls today about, but we'll get there. We will discuss that eventually. But funding growth, yes. Do we have to take care of roads, infrastructure in order to facilitate growth? Yes, we do. I've always, as you all know, I've always been kind of a 0% tax guy. So how do we get there? Where's the balance in that? I think the balance is when we look at budget, when we have our budget deliberations, we have to look deeper into where are we spending our base budget? The base budget is something that I found over the last 11 budget sessions I've been involved in. It's something that's overlooked, and we don't look to base budget. We look towards new initiatives, new spending. And I really hope as a council, although it would take a lot longer to get through, but maybe if we tweak the budget deliberation mechanism. Oh, sorry, I'm sure I'm blowing my 10 seconds here. But
Wrap up
yeah.
your thought. Oh, thank you, Councilor Bondi. Yes, sure.
I'm almost there.
Okay.
To me, base budget, I think, is very important. It's something we don't look at. We have these expenditures in base that we just sort of blow through, and we really need to dig into base in order to find ways to reduce our spending, and which would reduce some servicing, of course, but that's, if you spend less money, obviously the service is going to be reduced. But to me, base budget's very important. Thank you for those 10 seconds.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Bondi. Councillor Sakachi.
Thank you. Through your worship to you, Kathy. In all the comments that were mentioned today, it's very apparent that COVID has obviously changed the landscape of how we do things. So I think we'd be doing a tremendous disservice to our community if we didn't look at ways to kind of change the way we're doing things and be more efficient. I guess to be very, just prompt, I guess I'm kind of in a neutral standpoint. What I would like to, what I would like to see is, I'm a strong believer that it's not really up to my opinion how we do this. I think that it would be very beneficial for us to really get involved in the community, like Let's Talk CK, and put out some really good surveys and feedbacks to the community to better help us make our decision on what we can do, what the community wants to see, if they're okay with less services, if they're okay with more online and different services. And I think to make a better analysis of what you're asking right now, I would tremendously appreciate more feedback from my constituents.
Okay, that's helpful. So I'm going to just quickly play that back. Councillor Sakachi, I heard you say that you would potentially be open to reviews of services if you had more feedback from your constituents. Is that right?
Correct, because a zero budget is...
Okay. All right, and so just as I continue down the list, I'll remind you that I am going to get into a longer conversation about whether or not you would be willing to reduce services. If right now you can stick to your priority around growth or low budget, or whether they're equal to you, then I am going to come and dig deeper into the reduction in service. Councillor Crew.
Thank you, Mayor Caniff, through you to Kathy. Growth is extremely important to me. I think that the 20, 30 years down the road, and even in a few years, we're going to be looking at how do we come through COVID, and we're going to be, if we want to be a community that people will come to, we need the growth, but we also have to be responsible with our taxes. So we have to be, I'm kind of more on the growth side, because I think that the growth is going to stimulate the economy, and we just need to be efficient and find ways to get through this. And I think by being creative, we can do that.
Great. Thanks very much, Councillor Crew. Councillor Foss.
Thank you, Kathy. I'm very much in favor of growth. I'm looking at the activities that are going on, not only in Chatham, but also in Dresden with the new residential developments that's going on there, and potential other subdivisions going up there. I think we have to accommodate that, and the way the municipality is growing, I see nothing but positives. But I think that we have to be prepared and making sure that the infrastructure is in place to accommodate that. I also think that we have to be cautious with our budget. But I think with the growth we're having, the additional tax increases will sort of look after that. So.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Foss. Councillor Finn.
I'm right in the middle of it. Without any further information, I'm going to state I'm equal.
Okay, equal it now. Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I believe it has definitely been a priority of this council to focus on growth. Just looking back to earlier this year when we approved the growth strategy and the community improvement plan, we've already seen some results with that, and we have some momentum. However, I do appreciate, and it is a responsibility as a council to be fiscally responsible and to utilize the taxpayers' dollars in a prudent way. I think that being said, though, when you break it down simply to either we're growing or we're staying status quo or going backwards, I believe the community doesn't want to stay the same or see a decline. So therefore, we need to grow. I do like Councillor Scotch's idea of going to the community for more feedback. But I think us as a council need to responsibly and creatively support ways to support growth and make those investments as needed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hall. Councillor Harrigan.
Hi, thanks, Kathy. I will put myself in the growth category. And I will say, in terms of what we need to do to fund our growth, I'm open to looking at different things to stop, with the caveat that we need to maintain our communities as we grow. And I mean community well-being, community engagement, and the feeling and sense of belonging in our community by all community members.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Kathy. I am very focused on growth as well, as some of the other councillors have said. I think we need to plan for the future. In many ways, I believe that COVID is a blessing. It's prompted us to think and act differently. I believe that there can be no sacred cows, and I will have more to say when it comes to reduction of service levels when we get into that conversation.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Latimer.
Thank you, Kathy. I would echo Councillor Kirkwood-White. I am definitely in favor of growth, but review of services is very important, with community engagement absolutely essential.
Okay, thank you.
Of course,
yeah.
fiscal
Sorry, go ahead.
responsibility in our, that's okay. And fiscal responsibility on our part is ultimately our responsibility.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. Councillor McGrail.
Thank you. I'm definitely in favor of growth, but I think we still need the nod towards bringing everyone together, as in our existing infrastructure, and bringing that up to par. So as we move forward and we look, for new business, we have to, or residents, we have to remember our existing businesses and residents and make sure that they come forward too, and we're offering them the same services we're offering the new businesses. And being fiscally responsible is obviously part of that whole thing. So I'm kind of in the middle there, because I definitely understand and agree that we do need to grow, but we have to do this responsibly.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGrail. Councillor Brock McGregor.
Thank you. I would lean towards growth as well. And I think that while there may be a short-term option to emphasize budget over growth, I think once we look with a long-term lens, if we don't focus on growth, controlling escalating budget expenses won't be an option.
Okay, thank you, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Thank you, Kathy. I'll try and keep within my 100 seconds. I'm very much in favor of growth, but I do believe we do have to look at all the services we're providing and all of the infrastructure, because I think that many could be combined without losing too many services. So I think we have to look at it all. So, but I'm still very much in favor of growth to move forward.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Pinsonneau.
Thank you, Kathy. I believe growth is very important. However, growth and tax increase have to be a balancing act. I don't like the idea of a 0% budget increase if that means we're going to lose services in our small communities. Growth is happening right now on its own in every community, probably in every community in Ontario, which is a great thing. And that in itself is going to bring in a lot of tax revenue into our 2021 budget. Hopefully this whole closing businesses and all that other stuff is kind of put on hold for a year, because this has been one of them years that anything goes. I think this COVID, we are really seeing, services that can be done from different locations, and it'll be interesting to see what happens, but growth is always important, and luckily enough, we're growing on our own right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Pinsonneau. Councillor Solomon.
Big surprise, I'm in favor of growth and low taxes. In particular, in the year of COVID, well, actually in the second year, as we come up to the budget, and the impact that has on the revenues that are going to come in. We heard last meeting from Gord, who said we didn't get too hard hit in the collection of taxes, but that didn't take into, that's because we had a holiday until September 21st, September 11th, excuse me. It's yet to see what happens in the fall and next year, particularly when we know we're not getting the revenues in from the casino and other places. So as for service levels, I guess we can talk about that later. All I say is, I just think we got to look at them and bring the service, not to end or cut services, but to bring the services that we provide into the 21st century and recognize the changes that have occurred since 1997 in our community, world economy. And also, I don't think that we should be necessarily closing assets, but we should be looking at repurposing assets to create cost efficiencies to reflect the current reality that we live in and the one we're going to have for the next 10 years or more. That's it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Solomon. Councillor Thompson.
Like Councillor Bondi, I reject the idea that growth and budget are exclusive or mutually exclusive. I believe that as goes one, so goes the other. I believe that's what Councillor Solomon said. And I'd echo Councillor Pinsonneau's comments that we are growing on our own. I would say that as we look to funding growth in the future, I am dead set against socializing costs and losses and privatizing profits. And I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Kathy. Development growth is important for CK, because without it, we're just going to stay stale. Priority growth to me is equal. But we have to find a way to do a moderate tax increase. I don't think we can operate on a zero tax increase, or we can't go ahead any. Looking at debentures, I don't think it's a good way to move ahead either, because on a 20-year term, my grandchildren will be paying that debenture before it's paid for. We have to figure out how to do it on taxes and with our base budgets. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. So I've gone through the list of everyone present here this evening on council. Let me summarize for you briefly what I heard you say before we move to the next area. So I heard a strong commitment still to growth as a priority. I also heard that the lower the budget, the better, that corresponds with it. And that in terms of funding one or both, that you have an overall general appetite to consider some changes in the way that we either provide services, either the level of them or the ways in which we provide them, such that they could either be made more contemporary or made more effective in order to be able to harness some of the savings from those to be able to offset some of the costs associated with growth. And I also heard a number of you say that you are still very much looking for community input in terms of what those kinds of changes to various services might look like before you would be comfortable necessarily supporting a specific adjustment or cut or change. So, and I'm not sure that we mentioned at the very front end of this, but we will be doing a summary at the end of the meeting, not this evening, but a summary in terms of a written summary to follow up, just to make sure that we've captured your thoughts and views, and we'll play it back for you so that you have that. And in the event that we've missed anything in the interpretation of what you've shared with us, we'll have a chance to be corrected by that. And at a minimum, you'll know what's guiding our decision-making as we continue to go through. So because you've really tackled together the issue of your priority growth, budget, services, what we're going to do then is move right into the first department and the first conversation about reduction of services. Just this one will sort of warm you up before we get to one of the larger departments. So the very first one that you see in front of you here is corporate services. As you know, this is an area that I'm responsible for. And in this particular area, we have identified municipal information desks as one of the possible items that we could conduct a review on and perhaps provide opportunities for a change in the way that we provide service in order to offer up some savings to fund other areas. So our customer service team regularly reviews our statistics to ensure that we know exactly where our business volume is. There are opportunities from a business case perspective where we could streamline some services by offering them in a different way and potentially reducing facilities in which we're currently operating. Now, in some of the cases where we have shared services within other departments, we would have to consider this before the development of any recommendations were made, because obviously we co-locate in particular areas, and so a savings to one might not necessarily be a savings to another. And so the question here for you is whether you have any appetite for administration to develop any specific reduction or facility repurposing recommendations on this subject. So I'll pose the question once more to you, and then just to let you know, Councillor Wright, I'll be starting with you after we hear from Mayor Caniff. So the question again is whether you have an appetite for administration to develop any service reduction or facility repurposing recommendations on the subject of our municipal information desks. Mayor Caniff, if I can start with you, please.
I'll keep it very brief. Yes, we should be looking at that.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Kathy. I have to agree with the mayor, and I'll keep it brief. Thank you.
And your answer would be?
You agreed with the mayor.
You agreed with him. Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Councillor Thompson.
I would say yes, co-locations worked very well for Blenheim.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Solomon.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Pinsino.
This is one of those almost trick questions. The problem I have is the targets will be the small communities like Wheatley and Bothwell and Thamesville, and that's all these communities have. So I'm going to say no, because I know where that's going to go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Pinsino. Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Thank you, Kathy. And I think that we very much could be looking at combining services within our community. And so I guess I'm pretty much in favor of where the mayor and everybody else was going so far.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Brock McGregor.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor McGrail.
Yes, I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Councillor Latimer.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Harrigan.
Yes, I think modifying the way we deliver service is transformation, not elimination.
Transformation, not elimination. Did I hear you correctly?
That's right.
Thank you. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Kathy. I do support this, and I think in our part of CK and Wallisburg, we've had initial discussions about a community hub concept. So I think this idea relates to this concept. So I would support this. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hall. Councillor Finn?
I'm in agreement with Councillor Pinsino. If it's going to affect the smaller communities, then I am not in favor.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Kathy. I'm not in favor of eliminating them. I look at our service center in Dresden. It also does the licensing, and it does the Ontario work, or Ontario purposes as well. My theory is that if you take that out of the community, you're taking the main function out of a small community. So I think we have to be very careful not to say that we could put it into a different building, because I know the building that it's in is probably high maintenance, but I do maintain that we should look at that service remaining in the small community.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Foss. Councillor Crew?
Thank you. Yes, we can look at that.
Thank you. Councillor Sakachi?
Thank you, Kathy. I agree. I think, yes, I think we have to look at the way we're doing things now. I do agree with what Councillor Thompson indicated. I think that Blenheim is a perfect example of having a hub in the community and how well it works. And I think you could probably utilize that as an example. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sakachi. Councillor Bondi.
Thank you, Kathy. Yes, I support a review. The only thing that I would put on the off limits list would be having real people answer the phone at 360-1998. That's something I think is important. It's been discussed, but I really hope we keep that because it's very helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Okay, that was very helpful. Thank you for your succinct feedback on that. My playback for you is that I heard significant support or interest, appetite for administration to evolve some potential recommendations, and I certainly heard some comments about the concern about what the impact to those various small communities would be. And I also heard transformation, not elimination, and please keep real voices available to answering calls. So with that, we're going to move into the next area. The next area is infrastructure and engineering services. And Thomas Kelly is going to provide a couple of minutes overview for you, much similar to what I did at the introduction of the corporate service area. And so, Thomas, I'll pass it over to you first, and then as we're ready to navigate through the items, I will bring us back to council. Go ahead.
Thank you, Kathy. Good evening, members of council, members of the public. In infrastructure and engineering services, what I've tried to do is look at our services in three basic areas. So the first is that pure core assets that we have. That's the bridges, the roads, the arenas. And also to have a discussion around not simply closure, which would certainly bring savings, but also potential repurposing, which has been mentioned, and also potential sale as well. In the second section, we're looking at services that we offer and either reducing or eliminating, or some of the services that we do offer, we would charge a higher rate to the public. The third area is one that's very important that we have discussed many times. It was presented back in May of this year, where we looked at all of the conditions occurring out at Lake Erie. And currently we have 3 road closures that at this time, the asset management plan does not cover. There's some significant investment required if we were to return the service level to exactly where it is today. So I don't want to forget those. They're significant in nature. If you look at just along Lake Erie, with those 3 closures, we're talking about over $100 million worth of investment if we were to return those roads to their current state. And so that's the overview of the cost avoidance. I'll get into each area now. It may be a challenge to run through with council all the different ideas, but we'll give it a try here. So the first is the top 3 that you see under assets. Those top 3, actually 4, along with our buildings, are certainly the highest dollar value assets. And as you recall, we have about $5 billion in assets for all of Chatham-Kent, of which we're about 50% funded. So we made a commitment back in 2018 with the asset management plan that we would not only put 1% toward the asset management plan each budget, but we'd also look for 0.4% savings every year. And we have come short on those savings proposals to date. Just to give you an order of magnitude, 0.4% in tax savings would equate to about $640,000. So with that, with bridges and culverts, we've discussed them quite often. An example would be we brought the McDougall Line Bridge to council back in November of last year as a potential divestment, and it was declined. We also talked this year at length of bridges, and I separated them because they are quite different, and that was a conversion from movable to fixed. So in Chatham, we had 4 movable bridges, which eventually we moved to fixed. Right now, we have 5 movable bridges in Wallaceburg only throughout Chatham-Kent, of which 3 require some significant rehabilitation over the next 5 years. So I presented some numbers to council on that of some of the savings opportunities that were available. On our roads, certainly if we were to look at the sale or closure of a bridge, the road would follow. But there's also other roads within Chatham-Kent that we could look at maintaining some level of access, for example, to water and selling those roads off. Arenas is been discussed many times. We presented to council at the current demand level across all of our arenas. We're about at less than 30% capacity. If we could have some flexibility from the users to move to their requirements to different arenas, we could operate with 6 different arenas in today's climate. And we think that going forward, there are opportunities to look at that type of model going forward. Parks and docks, along with Clearville Park, we've talked about. You could add Mitchell's Bay Marina to that as well. Tennis courts, we've talked about buildings, as Kathy mentioned. We have many of our facilities are co-located. My colleague April will talk on the next slide about museums and some of the other facilities that we have, and libraries in particular. Swimming pools as well. We have 2 indoors, a number of outdoors. There's one in particular located in Chatham, which is more or less a wading pool that we've talked in the past about potential closure, which was not approved. And then sports fields. We have a number of sports fields within Chatham-Kent that right now we maintain them all. And that's certainly an opportunity if we want to look at some type of closure, repurpose, or sale. In the next area, service reductions. In some of our arenas, we have number 11, we have moved forward with eliminating canteen service and going to vending machines. It's been done very successfully. We could move to a model to do that across the board within Chatham-Kent. All of those canteens required staff to manage them, and they all lose money as well. And flower planting, we have eliminated flower planting this year. There's about $150,000, not a big number, but still that's certainly an opportunity. In February of this year, on number 13, we actually moved forward in a direction to expand some of the non-legislated services. So that's the banners, the Christmas lighting that we install. That's an area of potential service reduction. And during our amalgamation of the 23 communities, we still have a service, we call it the Leaf and Yard Waste Pickup. 8 communities still have that service, and the majority of Chatham-Kent does not have that service. There's a significant cost to that service. It is area rated. However, we've done some recent analysis, and we're not achieving the full cost recovery that we need to do. Next is the service fees. For example, our permits, our long grass, our weed bylaws that are in place, and then also potentially new service fees. We have a number of cases where we have motorists that are damaging the roads. We have right now no ability to try to recover those costs. And lastly, as I mentioned, the cost avoidance, which is with looking at just along Lake Erie, we're looking at about $100 million right now, a potential investment. And number 18 is in the sidewalk funding. So there was a time when all sidewalks were based on the local improvement charges, meaning that people who wanted a sidewalk would move forward and make a petition, and we would pay for a portion as a municipality, they would pay for a portion. And we moved to a general tax-based model. I would say certainly with the requirement now for salting sidewalks, there are many folks who do not wish to have a sidewalk in front of their house. However, we also have a strong initiative and a priority on health. And certainly if you've seen with COVID, I've seen more people walking our sidewalks, and there's a safety component associated with that, as well as those who require it for accessibility reasons. So there's many, many positive attributes as well. So that's my summary. And Kathy, I don't know if I turn it over to you, and if you want to walk through
Yes, thank you, Thomas.
councils and get their feedback, and what we'd like to know, if you'd like to pick some that you would consider reducing, closure, repurpose, or sale.
Right. Thank you, Thomas, for that. So a couple of points to make. Thomas has shared a list with you. What we don't intend by this list is that it's the only list or the exhaustive list. There could be things that are not listed on here that you have thought of that also fall within the IES area. So this is really their best list at coming up right now in terms of just to facilitate this discussion with council. So what my plan is in this particular area is I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and I'll ask you to answer them in this order. The first question to you when you look at this list is there anything that you would like administration to focus on? And then the second question is going to be, is there anything that's completely off limits? So I'm going to start again with you, Mayor Canna.
Kathy, if I could just add a comment on your first comment. Kathy is correct. There are some other things that we just did not feel it was logical to pursue. I'll give you some examples. Our storm network is one of our most underfunded assets. There's not really an option there to save a lot of money. Transit is another one, and the airport, as well as some of our fleet. So I just throw those out there that they were not on the list just because we did not feel it was practical to eliminate those assets. Thank you.
Thank you for the additional comments, Thomas. Okay, Mayor Caniff, question number 1 for you. Is there anything in particular you would like administration to focus on when they're developing their recommendations for council?
Just overall, what I'd like to see is us providing services more effectively. And whether it's consolidating buildings like we talked about in Blenheim, all the services are delivered out of one building. That's a great example of we're providing the service, but we're changing it. So I think me personally, looking across the board on all these things, if we can provide the service as effectively, but do it more efficiently, that's collectively what we should be focusing on there. And certainly is there some services that we can eliminate that there's not a high demand for.
Okay, thank you. And the second question, Mayor Caniff, is there anything that you see on this list that from your perspective is off limits in terms of administration bringing any recommendations back?
No, there isn't.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bondi.
Hi, thank you, Kathy.
Question number 1 is there anything on this list you'd like administration to focus on bringing back recommendations?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Mayor Caniff, through you to Kathy. I think sidewalks, bridges, arenas, the reason for my thoughts on these is sidewalks over the years, when we're installing sidewalks, quite often the vast majority of people that live on the street don't want that sidewalk, which of course the sidewalk's not for the people that just live on the street, and I get that. But still, I think that has to be taken into some more consideration. Bridges, again, I'm an urban guy, so I don't really, have a lot of input when it comes to rural bridges, but there's been a lot of conversation I've had with people that, some of these bridges are really, really underutilized, and are they really worth the expense to rehabilitate? So those 2 things I think are important. Arenas, I think usage just simply has to be looked at. If arenas in smaller communities or in Chatham or in Blenheim or in Wellsburg, if they're underutilized, yeah, they should be looked at, and particularly in Chatham. And we have a number of arenas, and if they're not running at a percentage of usage, then let's look at that. One thing that I would, question number 2, anything that's totally off limits, I would think maybe parks. I think parks are pretty inexpensive to maintain. They're pretty important. And again, the cost to maintain Tecumseh Park, again, speaking as a Chathamite, I don't think is a great expense. We're clearly not going to sell it. So if we cut the grass and keep the toys running, then I think we should be okay. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Bondi. Councillor Sakachi. The first question is there anything you'd like administration to focus on?
Thank you, Kathy. The one thing I guess I want to focus on a little bit would be the arena aspect. Obviously, I'm a very big supporter of minor hockey, but I do think that we need to look at the arena aspect. But I think we should be looking at it more so as the repurposing of the infrastructure, and coming up with ways it could potentially still be play a vital role in the community. I don't know if there's any other community in Ontario that has, just over 100,000 people that have 10 urban type arenas. And I think that would allow us to focus on improving the quality of the infrastructure that we have here. Not saying I want them to be closed, but I do think that we need to utilize repurposing them to different types of sports fields or places for the community to gather, because they are community hubs. The one thing that I don't like, which is in the same topic, is the area rating. Through the whole campaign process, we've all been very, Mayor Caniff has said it many times as well, a very inclusive community and a very together community. I think that if you start contemplating area rating things, that we're going to create a divide, and I don't want to see a divide in our community in regards to who has what service and what infrastructure.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Sakachi. Councillor Carew.
Thank you, Kathy. Okay, so I think I've got this straight. So I think that to maintain almost all of these services, I think we need to look at community partnerships, and I think we need to look at that so we can keep some of these things. I would like to see us continue to fund our infrastructure. It's taken a while to get that needle moving in a different direction. I think we would be very irresponsible to stop funding that. Number 17 and 18, cost avoidance, I think we need to focus on those. That's road closures and new sidewalks. I think we used to do that, and I think it was effective. Things that I agree with Councillor Bondi, parks. I don't want to see any parks closed, parks, trails, anything like that. Number 13, public works special services. I know these aren't legislated items, but these are community items, and I think that these are some things, just small things. I don't know really what they cost, and I hope that we will get a report back. And this isn't a final decision. That's all I want to be very clear on. I want some more information, but that's my direction, I guess.
Great. Thanks very much, Councillor Cruz. So yes, this is a good moment for me to pause and just reassure Council that what you're saying to us tonight is in no way a final decision. We will be bringing reports back to you on these matters. And so the purpose of this evening is, as each of you provide us with your answers, we're getting a clearer and clearer view with each pass. And so this guides us and informs us in terms of what reports we will prepare for your consideration. And so you will still be making decisions about any of these items through our formal reports to council and budget processes. So thank you for raising that so I could clarify, Councillor Crew. Councillor Foss, first question, what particular services do you think we should focus on in terms of looking for reductions?
Thanks, Kathy. Arenas, I guess, has always been a hot topic, but I think there has to be some commitment from the community to support it. I look at Bothwell, probably Wheatley. Those two arenas have got their minor hockey and other hockey groups going to neighboring communities. So I think for them to make the arenas more viable, they need to get a commitment from those groups to stay and to support the arenas that we're funding there. I look at the distance between Bothwell and Richtown as well, and I understand Richtown's having a struggle with their arena as well. I look at my ward, we have one arena, and people from Mitchell's Bay, Grand Point, they're driving to Chatham or Dresden to support that arena. So I think we need to look at that, but I think we need to get a commitment from the hockey or skating groups or whatever to make a commitment so that we can make them more viable. I look at Clearville Park.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically not making us any money. We're losing money on that. But I think we should maybe looking at the conservation authorities' willingness to maybe take those over because I know St. Clair has 3 camp facilities, and they're all in a very good profit margin situations. So I think we should be looking at that. I look at number 12, flower planting, and I believe that's only done in Chatham because the other communities, they have local groups like horticultural societies doing the flower planting there. Now, our horticultural society has an area rated grant to provide the services that they provide, and I think that's probably something that should be looked at in Chatham if they're going to continue to provide that service. Thank you.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Foss. Councillor Finn, first question is what would you recommend the administration focus on in terms of any service reductions, if any?
Well, definitely the arenas, and like Councillor Foss said, speak with the communities before closing to see if in fact they could work with them in order to utilize better use of the arenas. Because I do know Bothwell has gone above and beyond in trying to use that arena as much as possible, not just for hockey. Again, Clearville Park, definitely with the conservation area. I know they had talked about it before, that it might be something to look into. I don't want to see any parks closed, possibly charging to use the docks. The flower planting, if there's an organization that would be willing to volunteer some time in doing that. It's not the fact that it's being done, it beautifies an area and makes it look a little bit more appealing, like with the Christmas lights. The banners are very important come Remembrance Day. So I don't want to see that stuff cut.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Finn. Councillor Hall.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Yeah, I'm open to receiving information on any of these items. However, I just want to point out that for some of these items, I wouldn't want communities to feel singled out. But I do think it's a responsible thing to do, to take a hard look at what type of service reductions make sense across the board for all of our communities.
Okay, that's helpful. And can I ask you the follow-up question then, out of this particular list, is there anything on this list that from your perspective, you would not have an appetite to entertain recommendations on?
Well, I do want to comment on this. I was looking at my notes, particularly on to number 2 about the conversion on bridges, conversion from movable to fixed.
Yes.
You know, I was looking at my notes from a few months ago about the baseline bridge report. I know we're still waiting on information, and I know there was consultation that we approved with that approved motion and the direction that we provided. I won't go into details on that, but in relation to this conversation, I hope that staff and us as a council consider the whole picture when looking at some of these items. You know, sure, bridges are listed under IES, but I know a lot of benefits and potential opportunities that bridges, you know, for example, how they relate to other departments like community development, tourism, economic development, and not to mention other practical uses and partnerships like conservation authorities, our First Nations partners and friends, and of course the province and the feds. So I would just hope that and urge that staff and us as a council take this broader look. You know, we don't just look at bridges as an IES asset. It's a Chatham-Kent asset, and there's far-reaching impacts that don't necessarily have a dollar figure attached to it. You know, so bridges and other services, I think, if we're taking critical looks, we should follow this kind of full and wholesome perspective. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Hall. Councillor Harrigan.
Thanks, Kathy. I will generally begin by saying I'm very stricken by the way that this list is presented to us, in that some of the individual items identified as an asset for closure, repurpose, or sale cannot and should not be looked at as only an asset. So a park, for example, is not an asset. It's a green space that we can invest in to do more than just live in green parks and have open spaces. It also connects us to a larger goal of environmentalism and supporting to take action against climate change. Pools and other recreation facilities are not just places where people go to have fun or go to exercise or go to play sports. It's where they go to find commonalities and unity and community, and also in many cases gain skills needed for their future careers here in Chatham-Kent. We talk so much about growing and wanting to invest in making sure that we are ready, shovel ready for some of those large businesses to come in and move here. But if we don't have the welcoming community with the amenities that families like mine are looking for, then they will choose not to move here, and they will go to some of our neighboring communities that have these assets that are well developed. I think when we are talking about bridges, we would be amiss to look at simply usage, and we need to acknowledge that we tout that we grow for the world and that agriculture is our #1 industry, and that these bridges are connected to other places. And we're also surrounded by water. And again, when we're looking to attract people to Chatham-Kent, we talk about the waterfront that's all around us. So, we would be amiss to, promote something on our website, but then make decisions looking at some of these as just simple cost assets. So I think that I'm open to seeing staff's presentation in terms of cost savings in these areas. But if they're approached in the way that we have been approaching assets in our infrastructure and engineering services, then I would not be supportive of reducing them, because I think that Thomas's team really needs to connect with April's team to look at bridges and other assets in new ways so that we really get that whole picture. In terms of other service reductions, again, when I said I was in support of growth but without sacrificing community, I think we, again, are kind of barking up the wrong tree when we're looking to eliminate things like flowers, banners, and Christmas lighting, because those things create community for a very, very small cost when we're looking at the overall budget.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Harrigan. Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Thank you, Kathy. I would first like to comment on Councillor Hall's comment about the fact that we are the municipality of Chatham-Kent, and sometimes our current ward system can present challenges for us. I'm going to reiterate what I said earlier on in the meeting about the fact that there can be no sacred cows. I think that all options need to be considered in this exercise, including area rating. Given the reduced demand for some of the services as far as arenas, I think we need to take a look at closing, selling, or repurposing existing facilities. As an example, we talked some time ago about Erickson Arena being used for other things like indoor soccer and pickleball, sorry. And I'm a golfer, I'm not a pickleball player, by the way. And other assets such as bridges that might benefit only a few constituents. And, we've already made some decisions about some of these things, and given the delays due to COVID, I think we might want to reconsider our previous approvals where construction has not yet commenced. I think we also need to take a very hard look at what the municipality is doing that might be duplicating services provided by local businesses and nonprofits, and whether the municipality needs to be in the service provision business or simply ensuring that these services are provided to local constituents. And I wonder aloud whether there might be an opportunity for us over the next 3 months leading up to the end of the year to perhaps pilot a program that tries something a little different with regard to the scheduling of some of the facilities that are typically being used for hockey and ice skating, and see whether we get any interest at all from other user groups that might want to use these facilities for some other purpose.
Okay, that's very helpful. Thank you, Councillor Kirkwood-White. I'm going to move to Councillor Latterman in a moment. I'm just going to do a quick check-in with Council to let you know we're about at 7:25. We knew that this particular section would be more detailed than some of the others, just given the number of items, and everyone is certainly providing some really good feedback. This is very valuable. What I'm going to ask you for the balance of council members that are left on this particular item if you can succinctly put your thoughts into these areas, if there's something that's been said and you endorse, perhaps just repeat that. And then in this way, we may well be able to get through our other two areas before 8 p.m. We'll do our very best. At the same time, I don't want to cut you off from this important conversation. So I'll carry on with Councillor Latimer next, please.
Thank you, Kathy. I too am open to receiving a service review for all of these services. I'm looking to hear about optimizing efficiencies, cost sharing of amenities between the smaller communities where they share like infrastructure, eliminating low demand or underutilized services by perhaps veering these towards private and not-for-profit service groups that are already doing this type of thing. And I agree with Councillor Kirkwood-White. In the areas we should be enabling these services versus actually providing them. And that's not to say that we don't fund them or a portion of it, but I want to take a look at that. That's
okay,
it.
Great. Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you, Councillor Latimer. Councillor McGrail.
Thank you. I'm definitely for, you know, a review of all of these things. The canteens or the vending machine thing, I think that's great. I think we do need to look at the area rated stuff, and that we should be, you know, getting our money back from that if it is an area rated situation. I'm also, you know, up for creative, you know, buy, sell, improvise on bridges and roads out in, you know, maybe our rural areas that maybe only a few particular individuals are using, but making a creative solution to help them out and move forward. So I'm very interested in that. And you know, the banners and Christmas lights, I think that is a necessity. But you know, in Dresden, for example, I know that if they had the opportunity to be able to put their own up, you know, I don't know the legality around that maybe they would definitely take over that. But I don't think, if that's not going to happen, I think that banners and Christmas lights and that is very much a community spirit that we may take away. So that in a nutshell is my thoughts.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor McGrail. Councillor Brock McGregor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be interested to see recommendations on any of the things listed, without a commitment to say that I'd vote yes on those recommendations, but I think it's helpful as both an exercise to understand where there's cost savings and to for us to have an idea of the value of each service, and even if we're going to continue to provide them, just what that's costing. As far as areas of interest, I would think building consolidation would be one of the main ones, and some things that I would be maybe less interested in seeing, as others have said, parks and actually sidewalks. I think are one that I wouldn't be interested in seeing a reduction in service, and I think over the past 6 months we've seen why for those two assets.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Thank you, Kathy. You know, there's been some really great comments, so I won't double up on any of those. Bridges and culverts, bridges conversion from movable to fixed. I know that we in Wallaceburg are the only ones with movable bridges, and so it's difficult for other communities to understand the need for movable bridges. If we want to convert Wallaceburg into something new in the future, and we've been asked to look at long term, then, you know, Wallaceburg was a very viable area for travelers and boats and all of such. So I think that, you know, if we just drop movable bridges in Wallaceburg, then we're losing a great opportunity to look at where Wallaceburg could be in the future. We have definitely turned probably more into a veteran community. Yes, our factories have businesses in them, they don't have the same numbers. So we need to be looking at futures for Wallaceburg and what happens there. If things like this get area rated, I also feel that if you're going to area rate a community for a particular service, whether it be an arena, whether it be a bridge, you know, whether it be a swimming pool, then any of those funds need to return to those communities, and those do not share in the elevated communities. So if we're an area rate, then those proceeds go to the area. Roads, I think we have a lot to look at. I do think that we have a lot of roads that probably could be either turned over to some farmers in different areas, or the servicing maybe not the same. Arenas and area rating, I think I touched that on the bridges. And the only thing I would say about arenas, I do not understand why the municipality has never, and I understand it this year, but why arenas have never been pushed for ball hockey, roller skating, and other summer events. So I think that should happen. Parks and docks, I think where it is a matter of tourism, we need to look at docks that are going to attract people to come to our community. As far as parks, I think there's some that have a lot of extra space that could be turned into natural grasses for this area. Clearville Park, I don't think we should be in the camping business. Tennis courts, I'm kind of up there, and I don't know how to know enough because I'm not a tennis player, but I don't understand why tennis and pickleball could not be put into our arenas in the summer. Buildings and community halls, I do think there is a lot of opportunity for combining some of those. Swimming pools, again, indoor, outdoor, I think they are very beneficial for our kids and our children, especially I think in Wolfsburg, we have 3 branches going off the downtown core of Wolfsburg, and our swimming pool is dependent upon to teach our kids how to swim. We don't really like to teach them how to swim in the Sydenham River. As far as sports fields, I think, again, look at the size and dimension, how many do we need in every area. Area canteens and such, I think that's probably not a bad idea. Flower planting, again, I think that goes over the cultural society, whether we do that. Banners, I think, is very necessary. If you want to attract people to your community and attract tourists and different things, there are certain things you have to do. Leaf and yard waste, it should be standardized right across the municipality, and increase in service fees for long grass and weeds. I brought a motion for this and tried to get this done, and it's come back at very low cost. I think if we have to go out and, especially for property standards, and we have to cut grass for somebody, it should be top cost. It should be an escalating cost. And considering new service fees for road use and charging for damage, I think there should be limits set there, and maybe we need to look at that. And far as cost avoidance and stuff, I do think that we should be looking at some road closures. We do have a lot, way too many maybe. And sidewalks, again, I've seen areas where sidewalks have been installed brand new, or and where some have not been replaced or fixed. So I think that's a whole topic that we need to discuss, community to community, to understand what's going on in each community.
Thanks very much, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Pinsonneau.
Thanks, Kathy. I think bridges, culverts, roads, they have to be looked at. I don't believe area rating will work in arenas. Stay away from that one. Don't touch the parks. Clearville Park, it should be turned over to one of the conservation authorities. I think that'd be a good fit. The Mitchell's Bay Marina, that's a very valuable asset. I think as it comes closer to the time that lease ends, we should look at what kind of value that could bring the municipality. And I do believe that a new owner would, if you own the assets, you would look more at improving it. I don't think we should be touching swimming pools. Buildings, I think we do have to look at buildings. However, I don't want to see this become a task where you're going to start closing service centers and libraries to eliminate a building. But we do need to look at our building inventory for sure. I think we leave the sports fields alone. Arena canteens, probably a good idea to look at that one. The flower planting, I think, is done by the horticultural groups anyway. Leaf and waste, I guess that should probably be standardized. I agree with the increase in fees, but one thing I think should be off limits is the arenas, and they don't break even. Everybody knows that, but they are very vital to their communities. And to what Councillor Foss said earlier, Bothell has worked hard to keep their numbers up, doing summer programs, and they have done their part. They have the unfortunate of being located on a border. Anyway, that's all I got.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Pinsnow. Councillor Solomon.
There, okay. Under the asset closures, repurposing, sale, I'm of the view that there are no sacred cows. And I think everything has to be looked at. I don't know that I like the idea of area rating, but I also don't like inefficiencies. And I think we've got to get over the old artificial borders and find efficient ways to do these things. So all have to be looked at. Potential service reduction. And I don't like the idea of calling it closures. I just think we've got to recognize that more than 20 years have passed, and we've got to act like we're in the 21st century instead of the 19th. Potential service reductions. All of those should be looked at. I don't know about flower planting eliminate. I think that's an area rated thing. And I also think some of the public works stuff should be area rated and I know the leaf and yard waste are area rated. I don't know what to consider new service fees for road use charging for damage means, but if somebody damages a bridge, then they should be charged for the repair of it if they've done it with some heavy equipment or something. Cost avoidance, yes, I agree with 17 and 18. I think you could do that tomorrow. So there you go. And that's principally, if we get into these situations, most of the sidewalks happen to be in Chatham. So I'm quite happy to go back to the way we used to do it, which is local improvement charges.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Solomon. Councillor Thompson.
Thank you very much. I very much agree with Councillor Harrigan on this matter. Looking at this list, sports fields, swimming pools, tennis courts, arenas, these are all things families use. And keeping in mind the task force report above us, I'd struggle with the idea that we close these things to the detriment of families, only to hand that money to businesses. That said, I do agree with Councillor Solomon in regards that there are no sacred cows. So I think for me, the most important thing is what we do with any cost savings that we do come across. So in general, I'd say I'm supportive of looking at everything, with the caveat that I would only support it if the money was going to benefit the people that we're taking away from. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Could I maybe ask you for one point of clarification on that, on your last comment? So could you provide me with an example of what you mean to it would be benefiting the person that it goes to?
Well, sure. So, I mean, in the report that we have before us, we're looking for $2 million in savings from service reductions so that we can make that available as immediate relief to businesses. I'm not in favor of closing an arena and then making the money we just saved by closing an arena available to businesses as immediate relief. I would think that savings would go back into the general tax base.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification. Okay, last but not least, Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Kathy. A lot of this has been covered as I look at it here. Of the 18 lines, there's probably 9 of them that we could get community groups more involved in to take some of the work off of the staff or see if there's cost cutting ways. Community groups seem to get things done, especially the group in Bothell there with the arena. They do real well at it. They're kind of our model group for organizing. I do agree though on the Clearville Park that Lower Thames or somebody else should be running it. We shouldn't be running it as Chatham-Kent. And as far as cutting flowers and other banners, that all goes back to our tourism too. When people come to Chatham-Kent, they like seeing what's here. We have to watch what we cut so it don't take away from it, right down to our tourism. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Councillor Wright. Okay, that is everybody has spoken on this point. Let me give you a quick summary of what I heard you say. First of all, what I heard is that overall there is a significant degree of openness about a conversation about a review of services. That said, you would like it done in a thoughtful type of way. And to that I mean that if we are looking at divesting certain services, you would like to see us first examine some options around repurposing where possible, and with overall consideration really for considering these items, the totality of the community impact that they have, as opposed to them singularly as an asset to the community. And we heard about examples of how these various assets, as we referred to them here, provide other options and services in other areas of our community, from a community health perspective, from a leisure and culture perspective, etc. So we also heard you say that if we are moving out of particular businesses, is there a world in which that they can transfer over to other providers such that the service continues to be provided in the community if the municipality itself is not providing it? I heard clear commentary, a strong interest in examining, coming back with recommendations for arenas, sidewalks, bridges, canteen, and Clearville Park. I heard not so much interest in parks in general, the other parks that we have. And I heard mixed reviews on area rating. We do have some additional notes besides that, but I just wanted to give you a very quick summary just to play it back for you in terms of what we heard. So this has been very useful feedback. I know that we can sit and talk probably for a couple of hours on this slide alone. And it's always the trick that we find ourselves in when we're evolving recommendations for council, to make sure that the time that we spend, we're spending it on the things that you actually want to give consideration to, as opposed to frustrating you and everyone else in coming up with various options for which there's less appetite. So these things are certainly guiding us right now. I'm going to pause here for a moment. We're at 7:40. We have about 15 minutes left because we need about 5 minutes left to close out our evening. So I think what I'm going to suggest is that we will take a quick look at April's area, and perhaps we'll just tackle one particular point in this. The FBIS area, which would have been the one that would follow this, Gord is going to be bringing back some reports to council on the October 26th meeting, I believe it is. So you will have the chance in the not too distant future to continue this conversation on with that particular area. So I think what I'm going to do this particular time, as we flip here just for a moment, if I can, into the community human service area, my suggestion is going to be on this particular subject. I'm simply going to ask you the question, is anything on this list off limits? A very brief answer without explanation. We'll have time for explanation later, but just give us your particular view on that. April, before I go around the table for that, do you need a couple of minutes to intro anything on this, or are you comfortable with me just starting in speaking with council on this?
Thanks, Kathy. I would like to speak. I think that the programs and services in community human services are significant importance to this community and add the real kind of people fabric. And so I do have some concerns that we do not have enough time to go through these and do them justice. So I don't know whether you want me to provide the information I was going to provide and then tackle some of the other stuff afterwards or at another time. What would you like? I do have some things I would like to say.
Okay, go ahead, please, April.
Thank you, Kathy. So I think for council, community human services is certainly responsible for many program and service areas. The majority of those are provincially and federally both mandated and funded. So when we looked at coming up with the impact on services and some of the human service things we've struggled with, certainly through COVID, these are the things that we thought we should at least take a look at. Certainly with libraries, one of the things I said to our team right at the beginning of COVID was that books bind us together. And over kind of the last several months, we have had to really grapple with providing library services in a different way. And what does that look like? And so we've really had some initial discussions about, is there a need for all of the bricks and mortar, or do we need to move to a more virtual online system, or is it a combination of both, and what does that look like? We want to make sure that services are maintained in our smaller communities, and we really want to look at co-locating libraries with other services and entities, and what might that look like. With respect to museums, currently we own and operate the Chatham-Kent Museum, Milner House, and Ridge House Museum. And our question to look at is that the right number? Are we providing the right services in these facilities? And we have to also look at the fact that we have a number of private and not-profit historical assets as well throughout our community, and might, and I'm not saying yes or no to this, but certainly might some of these assets be better served by some other community historical groups. And so we want to look at that and have those conversations with our community partners. And then finally, recreation programs. What has come out of the Chatham-Kent Task Force is really that there are times when municipal programs and services are in direct competition with our private and not-for-profit. So what, in meeting with the sector groups that I had the opportunity to meet with, what I did say to them is that I am quite willing and actually looking forward to meeting with them to do a deeper dive in all of our recreation programs and services to make sure that we identify gaps and get rid of any duplication that might be out there that really, frankly, prior to COVID-19, we were certainly not as aware of. And so that is one of the really good things that has come out of some of the painful things that have happened over the last 7 months. So that's my comments, Kathy, and thank you for that, for indulging me, and I turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you very much for that summary, April. Council, my suggestion is going to be, I know that we won't be able to get through hearing everyone in 14 minutes. So my suggestion is that I will quickly go around the horn and ask you if you would be willing to take probably about a half an hour, which will bring us to about 8:15. I think that will allow us to get all the way around the circle to let you have your input on this particular item. And then I did mention to you a moment ago that Gord was bringing a report. I thought it was in later October. It's actually at your October 5th meeting. So we won't tackle that piece tonight. We'll let that be something that you get to continue this discussion on October 5th. So if you can just quickly let me know if you would like to continue to 8:15 to finish this particular section off. I'll ask you very quickly, just a yes or a no. Councillor Caniff?
Yes.
Councillor Bondi?
Sure.
Councillor Sakachi?
Sure.
Councillor Crew?
Yes.
Councillor Foss?
Yes.
Councillor Finn?
Sure.
Councillor Hall?
Yes.
Councillor Harrigan?
Yes.
Councillor Kirkwood White?
Yes.
Councillor Latimer?
Yes.
Councillor McGrail?
Yes.
Councillor B. McGregor?
Yes.
Councillor C. McGregor?
Yes.
Councillor Pinsino?
Yes.
Councillor Solomon?
No.
Councillor Thompson?
Yes.
And Councillor Wright?
Yes.
Okay, so we will continue on. We'll make sure that we wrap this up at 8:15. And this time I'm going to start in the middle of the deck. And Councillor Harrigan, my question to you first is anything to focus on, anything to stay away from?
I think, again, I would say to focus on transformation, not elimination. I think all of these three are important. I am concerned about recreation programs, so I would urge April to make sure that she is considering small towns, because in this particular situation, geography matters.
Great, thank you. Councillor Kirkwood-White.
Let's be creative.
Okay, is there anything specifically that you would like us to stay away from?
Nothing.
Thank you. Councillor Latimer.
Very happy to hear that we are not thinking about divesting libraries, but co-locating and amalgamating with other services entities. And also hearing that we're going to respect the historical perspective, but recognize that there are other, again, private and not-for-profit groups that could maybe pick up those services with some funding from us. And with regard to the rec programs, again, very glad to hear that we are looking to identify gaps, but not be in direct competition.
Thank you, Councillor Latimer. And just for a point of clarification, this particular slide does say co-locating or divestment, but I took your comment to say you'd be interested in co-locating, not divestment, right?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McGrail.
I'm all about partnering and partnerships, and if there's any kind of creative granting, we'll call it, that maybe right now the municipality provides through funding from provincial or federal that could be passed through to other partners to create the same kind of program. So partnering and creativity and how to execute recreation programs and the museums and the libraries would be a great thing.
Thank you. Councillor Brock McGregor.
Thank you. Yeah, I'd be interested in co-location as a focus. And I think that preserving recreation programs from a perspective of access for vulnerable and at-risk and low-income individuals is important, whether that's through partnerships or municipally.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Carmen McGregor.
Thank you, Kathy, very much for co-locating. And if anything was to be taken off, it would be movable bridge structures. They are on the Mollisford, and if they are gone, it eliminates our future ability to improve transportation. No, sorry. It removes our ability for investment in our community moving forward, and with the God, gotta hate it. You gotta hate a menopausal mind here. So sorry, Kathy, you got the word. Come on.
Yep. I'm not sure what your word is on this one, Councillor McGregor. I'm sorry, I can't help you with this.
Aaron will get to it, but no, it would be allowing for us to have people coming into the community and to invest in our community and changing the structure maybe of our downtown core area that is going to attract outside people for community, which would bring other investment and other tourism dollars, there's the word, tourism dollars into our community and in Chatham-Kent.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Councillor McGregor. Councillor Pinsonneau.
Thanks, Kathy. I have no interest in co-locating or divesting the libraries. I think the museums and the rec programs, more so the rec programs, should be looked at for sure. Because as I stated earlier, they are competing with the rest of the community. So, but anyway, museums and rec programs I don't have a problem with. I have no desire to co-locate or divest.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Councillor Pinsonneau. Councillor Solomon, it's still before 8 o'clock.
Good. I'm quite the opposite to the last comment. With respect to libraries, the library board every month does a tremendous job on collecting statistics on usage. I think you should simply look at the facts and make decisions from there on co-locating and divestment. With respect to museums, there's not a lot of money spent there, but if it can be done more efficiently, then look at it to be done more efficiently. Recreation programs, I really don't know enough about what recreation programs we're currently providing and what conflicts there are with other groups providing them. But it doesn't hurt to look at that in order to come up with efficiencies.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Thompson?
As far as libraries go, not opposed to co-locating, very much in favor. Opposed to divesting. Museums and rec programs, I'm okay for looking at. I think one of the things we do need to keep in mind, obviously, for people listening at home is that there is going to be opportunity for public feedback and input, and this is not a decision the council will make by itself.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Kathy. Looking at these three here, we should look at them maybe, but we got to remember when we get to the museums, we're into our tourism. When we get into our rec program, we're into our youth. How far do we want to cut just to save dollars? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bondi? Councillor Bondi, have you got your mute off?
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I there now?
You are, thank you.
Okay, great. Sorry about that. With all three, I believe we should look at usage. Library, museums, recreational programs. As Councillor Salmon had indicated, there's a lot of data generated by the library, which we get pretty regularly, probably semi-annually. But what I'd like to see when it comes to usage is, are we counting the same people over and over again? When the door opens and closes, is it the same people 5 times a day? So I think that's something that we have to look at. But to me, it's all about usage. If they're not being used to the point that they're relevant, then I'm in favor of co-locating or divestment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bondi. Councillor Sakachi?
Thank you, Kathy. I would be definitely interested in co-locating libraries. We talked a lot about this conversation with assets, but I think our biggest asset in CK are the people. So I'm not really too prone on saving money at the cost of the people, especially recreation programs. So I think that there's ways that we can kind of do things better, and I think we do have to get creative, and as well as not duplicate services that the public is offering. But definitely interested in the co-location.
Great, thank you very much. Councillor Crew?
Thank you, Kathy. Libraries, co-locating, not divestment. Museums, I have a problem with closing any museum because I believe that museums and theaters and all of those things are part of what brings people to communities and to live in communities. Recreation programs, I liked what April said about getting some not-for-profit or other partners on board to make sure we have those programs. But I would like to also make sure that it's really important that these programs are accessible to all of the users, whether it's seniors, children, vulnerable sector, kids at risk. Make sure that the barriers are removed so that they can access all of those recreational programs.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Crew. Councillor Foss?
Thank you, Kathy. Libraries, I wouldn't want to see any changes in them. In my opinion, it's a focal point of the community, and during the COVID-19, when they were closed, it showed that there was a real desire to reopen them, and I know that the usage is huge, and I wouldn't want to jeopardize that service. And I may need clarification on this, but are we only financing the museum in Chatham and Richtown? Is that correct?
Go ahead, Don. Yeah, go ahead, April. Thank you.
Thanks, Kathy. Thank you, Councillor Foss. We have the Chatham-Kent Museum, which is at the Cultural Center. We have Milner House, which is across kind of from the Cultural Center and Tecumseh Park. And we have Ridge House Museum in Ridgetown.
Okay, I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that we have the Wallsburg Arena or Museum, as well as the Black Historical Museum, and we're not funding them. So I think that we should be looking at special interest groups in maintaining those museums that we're financing now. I know Dresden's been trying to develop a museum, and that's strictly a community effort. As far as recreational programs, I think they're important. Our health statistics dictate that we need to be more active. And if we jeopardize those recreational programs, we would be defeating the purpose in trying to make us a healthy community. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Foss. One moment, please, Don.
Thanks. Just one point of clarification. For museums, the municipality also provides sustaining grants to the Wallaceburg Museum and our Black Historical Societies as well. So although we're not running those, there is a significant amount of their operating budget that comes through the municipality. Thanks.
Okay, just can I follow up on that then?
Sure, go ahead, Councillor Foss.
Okay, maybe we should be treating the other two museums in that same manner then. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Councillor Finn.
Libraries, I think the library board does a wonderful job on how they put out the services, and they already look at trying to save money on a daily basis. That I think keeping them as it is, unless they themselves think that a branch could be better suited co-locating someplace. Museums, like Councillor Cruz said, that's part of our tourism. However, if they could do a private partnership with the city and possibly save money, that could be looked at. And recreational programs, if there's no duplication, I think that they do need to be looked into and being provided, because they service an area that they can't afford to put them in organized sports. So I think it's very important that the programs are still considered if there's no private duplication.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Finn. Councillor Hall.
Thank you, Kathy. Yeah, I'm open to reviewing, excuse me, all of this. And I think, you know, to get the entire perspective, we should be looking at everything, you know, but we should also be looking, I think it's been mentioned, for efficiencies as opposed to just reductions and cuts, but how can we do it better? You know, what works collectively for everyone. And I guess just overall, not particularly related to these, but, you know, what trends in municipalities across Ontario or best practices, give us some data to kind of change our course for providing certain services. You know, and what have we learned during the pandemic? You know, I think April touched on it a bit with you know, the libraries definitely had to change throughout COVID-19, throughout this pandemic, and you know, what servants, you know, when certain services were scaled back, what worked well. Maybe there were some things that we could implement moving forward post COVID. What doesn't work? But overall, I think we need to take a hard look at everything. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. And Mayor Caniff.
I think all these are great examples of how we can deliver services more efficiently, co-locating and looking how we can deliver library services better, museums, how we can work with community groups, and recreation programs, how we can work with private business to deliver quality service.
Great, thank you very much. So let me tell you, play back for you what I heard you say. What I heard was a very strong appetite and interest in the co-location of libraries versus the divestment of libraries. I heard as it related to museums that this is still a priority for you, but you're interested in potentially seeing whether or not we can keep museums alive through special interest groups and partnerships, et cetera, some type of a collaboration. I also heard you say that as it related to recreation programs, that you are interested in hearing where the gaps in service programming is and where efficiencies can be achieved. And you're also particularly interested on all of these fronts for us to provide you with data that would back up any of the recommendations that we might be making with regards to any of these particular areas. Gord has asked me for 60 seconds to give you a piece of information on his slide that he would like you to have before October 5th. And then we will be moving to Dawn for final comments and over to the clerk to wrap up. Gord, you're up.
Hi, I just wanted to add, in addition to the there are 4 reports coming to you October 5th, so I won't get into those. But I did just want to mention that we were also looking at police, looking at both at vehicle usage and whether we could stretch that out a little longer, and at their locations where they have service centers open to the public that could work in conjunction with some co-locating of services and decisions of that matter. And also with, one important part is always requisitioning bodies, such as the 2 conservation authorities. There's member councils on those boards. So just that will also, we pay what they ask, but we'd like to make sure that you let your councillors that are on those boards know where you'd like them to be headed in their ask, even though they're facing some downloaded costs from the province. Thanks.
Thank you, Gord. A few wrapping up comments before we close out the meeting for this evening. First of all, I'd like to thank again the members of the Economic Recovery Task Force. You've consistently encouraged us to do constructive challenging of the status quo and look at how we can actually do better at providing services and trying to do that in a more efficient manner. Sorry, there's a space on the screen here. So sincere thanks for that. And I hope this evening you heard that your recommendations have all been taken to heart by the municipality, and we're doing everything we can to make sure that those are considered and how we can actually implement those. The second piece with respect to our funding of growth strategy, I think we've got some great feedback tonight from council, and I really want to extend my appreciation to the staff that put together the background documentations and for the facilitation tonight. I thought that was great, and you've given us, I think, some indication of where council's appetite is to balance off the various funding opportunities for us over the course of the next few months as we prepare the budget for council and for your consideration. Kathy did a great job facilitating the balancing exercise, and she's already done the service of feeding back to you what we've heard. We'll make sure that that's all included in the notes, and we'll be going back to council with a written report to give you that additional information. Could I have the next slide, please? There are some additional parking lot items that we've already indicated at the front end. We're not unable to cover all of the information that's come out of the Economic Recovery Task Force, but we will be coming back to council with specific reports on things like the Land Development Corporation and some of the specific recommendations they've given us feedback on this evening. So with that, I'd like to thank council and again administration and the task force for your participation in helping us get to this point this evening. Karen and a number of others have been doing Lions work behind the scenes, and special thanks to them as well, because we couldn't have gotten there without that support. So with that, I will turn it over to Mayor Caniff for our adjournment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Just wanted to say a couple things as well. I may repeat some of the stuff Dawn said, but I think it's important. The task force, I want to thank each and every person for coming together and spending their time to put this together. I want to thank administration for how seriously they've taken that's come to them, and the work they've done to bring this into fruition, as well as all the stuff they're doing to factor in the social side of things. I know that we've got business, we social, bring that together, but what we're talking about today and over the next few months will drive our community for the next 20 years. When I look back in 2008 when International closed, we didn't have a choice really in our growth, because our growth trajectory was set for us as far as decline. We're looking today now, we have that ability to choose growth. We have, as a council, by investing in our community, we can choose growth. So I am happy to hear that so many councillors are taking growth very seriously and put that as a high priority. I believe that we can grow as a community. We can be fiscally responsible to the degree we can. And I think we can create a number of win-win scenarios for our community, for our kids and our grandkids. So thanks everybody for participating tonight. And that's put it over to the clerk. Is there anything else we need?
Thank you, Mayor Caniff. I just have the wording up just to save people rustling papers. So for the adjournment, that Chatham-Kent Council adjourned to its next meeting to be held on Monday, October 5th, 2020, and that Chatham-Kent Council authorize itself to meet in closed session on that day to discuss any matters permitted by the Municipal Act. I just need a mover and seconder, Your Worship.
Can I get Councillor Solomon and Councillor Foss to move that, please? Oh, actually, can I get Councillor Foss and Councillor Wright?
I'll move.
Second, Mayor Caniff, thank you.
Okay, anyone opposed? Hearing none, thanks everyone and have a great night.